Good morning, everyone. Love the vests. I love the Director Sal's brought his own illumination, which is awesome. The call to order this committee of the whole meeting for Friday, October the 13th of 2023. TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nation communities across our vast regional district. Today, we are located on the Tecumloops to Secwepemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with Tecumloops to Secwepemc and respect the territory and land on which we gather today. We have the Committee of the Whole minutes from meeting minutes from June 16th, 2023. We do have a recommendation. Director Sal moves the recommendation. Thank you. Director Middleton seconds. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor, opposed, carried. All right, we move on to the big one. 4.1, remuneration and expense bylaw. I can't imagine that anyone will have anything to say on this. CEO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Roden. I know this discussion we've been having this discussion in the background for a while, and we felt like it would make sense to dedicate an entire meeting to making sure that the entire board is in line with what our policy says for expenses and what remuneration looks like. So we are going to bring it to you in a very logical fashion. Amanda's going to take us through it. She's on Zoom right now or on Teams, and she's going to walk through a PowerPoint presentation that basically dissects the report into small chunks so that we can actually do it in a really logical way and make sure that everyone can have their say and their input as we go through. So with that, I don't think there's anything else we need to say, but to get rolling.
Thank you. Good. Turn over to Ms. Allison. Take it away.
Good morning. Thank you all for having me. Apologies, I couldn't be there in person. And we will just walk through this report, and Marnie so gratefully is clicking forward my slides for me. Thank you so much if you want to click us forward. As CIO Hildebrand alluded to, my presentation really is to summarize the Committee of the Whole report that you all received last week. We'll walk through it kind of slowly, logically, and have pauses throughout for discussion on each of the items as they arise. So what we're referring to and what the Committee of the Whole report has attached to it as well is an appendix. That appendix is intended to summarize on the very left-hand column what the new board bylaw on remuneration and expenses could look like piece by piece. The middle column currently highlights all of the existing bylaws or policy that relate to remuneration or expenses, so you can see what is currently in place. And then the final column on the right gives you an illustration of what is either changed, added, or removed, so that we can kind of walk through that separately. And then the last attachment is really just the draft bylaw, which you have there at the end. So we can click forward. Again, thank you so much. The purpose really of today is for you guys to provide feedback. So this is a quick one. Sorry, Marnie, forward again. And I wanted to just go through a few slides here to talk about background for the report, so we can click right on through, Marnie, to guiding principles. So I wanted to pause here for a minute to really share an overview. The intent of these changes is not to overhaul the entire system in which we're operating for remuneration and expenses. The intent is to simplify. So we currently have about 4 or 5 policies that discuss board expenses, and then we have a board bylaw on remuneration. They overlap each other in parts. They kind of speak in different terms in other parts, so it's difficult. It's a lot for folks to understand. What we're wanting to do is try and align that, bring it together in something easier. The guiding principles that you see here are what is articulated in the new bylaw that I'm proposing. It really comes from our existing areas. So number 1 talks about remuneration. This guiding principle comes from our current remuneration bylaw. The second one about expenses comes from the variety of policies that we have that talk about expenses. The third one comes from both, and I've just tried to wrap it up there in a separate statement that summarizes optimizing the value to the taxpayer. And that comes from UBCM guidelines as well as some of our existing modules. So we can click forward one more, where you can see the current bylaw and board policies that are in existence. So currently we have a board remuneration bylaw 2711 that was finalized in June 2022. We have an older bylaw that I think we still need to deal with in some way because we didn't formally let go of it. So that's a bit of another story, but our guiding bylaw is the 2711. Then we have the 5 policies articulated below. We have board policy 114, about accommodation
Right,
prior to
everyone,
fall.
please remember where the muster point is. If you have mobility issues, please see Corporate Officer Lois. Please do not use the elevator.
Just a note for the recording, anyone listening, the fire alarm is currently going off, so we're evacuating the building.
Well, that's fun. I guess we can just run the meeting ourselves.
I was just checking who's online, but they're all staff members, so they'll be running out too.
Yeah, I think Ward just stepped off because he's taking this as a break, but yeah, there we go.
And this was Ward's request to have a fire drill, so
Oh, was it?
he's online today. Yeah.
Yeah, I just texted him and said, where the heck do we muster to when we're online? I mean, you know, really. Are we virtually in danger? Probably. I have no idea.
Yeah, the whole system could explode.
Yes. Good to know. Okie dokie. I'm gonna make
How's
a phone call. What?
Okay,
Sorry?
good. No,
Yeah.
go make your phone call. You're good.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Director Blackwell. It may be, just for I'm guessing about 20 minutes for the drill. So if you have other things to do, it's not going to be too quick.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to get a hold of my new CAO
Okay.
conversation, but he's, probably because he knew I would be unavailable
Busy.
for the next
Yeah.
3 hours. Yes, yeah, fine. Me and the dog will hang out, but I was just
Yes.
contemplating, as this is being recorded, whether or not I should, play some songs about loneliness and waiting. So, but I won't because, anyway.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Enjoy your time not speaking or, recovering or whatever.
Hi, Director Steamer.
Hi, Amanda. Hey, thanks for opening up that survey for me.
No problem. They're just doing
Yeah,
Oh.
they're doing a mock drill, right?
Yeah. I think we'll be about probably another 15 or so.
And this
Okay.
is still being recorded for, coughing and any other comments.
Well, I was going to suggest that the mustering point could be somewhere we could get a coffee and a donut, but I've already got a coffee.
You've already got one. Yeah.
I'm actually in Abbotsford right now. The highway was just a gong show. Somehow there was an accident just on the west side of the Portman Bridge about a click or two, and somehow it was a big truck and ended up smashing into a divider, so that it ended up causing traffic jams on both sides. And there was a motorcycle involved. I think it was a fender. No, but I think it was a fender bender. I don't think the motorist, was killed or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it was jammed up from the Brunette exit all the way on the west side, and it was jammed up from the Portman Bridge all the way to an overpass halfway to Langley.
Yep,
Like
been
just
there. Been there, done that many times.
And you know what they should have down here? They should have a camera for all these people that are in the HOV lane that only have one person. They should be able to have that technology, and no, I'm serious, and hit them at $250 every time they do that. It's absolute BS. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, just to let you know, people are coming back into the council chamber now. The drill's been completed, so.
Everybody's accounted for. Scott phoned me and said, "Where are you? You're supposed to be here. It was your idea." I said, "Friday the 13th. I'm not there." That's awesome.
And that went quickly too. That's great.
Well, that's great. Yeah, no, that's the way it's supposed to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that climate conference was really good. Merlin, you would have enjoyed it. There was some really good people from all over Canada. It was everything to do with.
Who was hosting that?
That's a really good question. It was at the Simon Fraser
Oh yeah,
campus downtown.
probably Simon
but-
Fraser's. Shelley Sim takes a lot of courses through a municipal and community governance program through Simon Fraser, and I can see them hosting that. So
The funniest one was on Wednesday when they keep talking about, these people in the heat dome and how, 26 and you're out and 31 and you're out and all these things. And here's a news flash for you. If it's really hot and you have to get to one of these cooling centers, maybe you should have a cool shower first.
yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, should we just, make sure we hold their hand too? Like,
But
Jeez.
people don't know. They haven't been. There's a lot of people that haven't been in this before. But yes, there's also another conference put on by the Climate Leadership Initiative, and it's in Richmond, and it's in the middle of winter when you really don't want to be home anyways. I go to that one every second year, and it's very BC focused. It's quite good. It's a 2-day, sometimes stretches to a 3-day. Yeah.
Well, this was all BC. This was all BC. Oh yeah, but there's people from all over the country that participate. Like I've got some stuff going on with the cooperatives.
Yeah.
And they were one of the sponsors.
Yeah.
And it's all about risk, and trying to balance risk. We're all in it. I mean, Merritt, for example, there was a presentation and they show the flooding and that sort of thing, and of course they don't say that the diking's going to cost $40 to $50 million that they don't have, and then now they're talking about new strategies of basically paying people off so they don't rebuild in these areas. Well, a lot of these people shouldn't have built there in the first place, and they said for every insurable dollar, it costs government $3 to $4. So sooner or later, we're going to have to come up with a different scheme, in as much as that if you're going to build in the floodplain, you're going to have to assume a whole lot more risk than somebody that doesn't, or just don't do it at all.
And I think the floodplain discussion is the beginning of the discussion. Fire risk will be a whole similar discussion that's going to ramp up, seeing what's happening with insurance around North America. So anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. We chatted about that. It was good.
Yeah, I think they're looking like they're almost ready to go here. So I'm going to mute.
Okay, me too.
Everyone can thank Ward Stamer for that drill.
Yeah, thanks very much, Scott. Appreciate that.
It's kind of a coincidence you're not here.
Friday the 13th, big fella.
Amanda, are you still there? Did you start vacation?
No, I'm still patiently waiting for that vacation. Yeah. Were folks ready, Scott? Or are we still waiting for people? Sorry.
Sorry, what's that?
Are folks ready to go, or are we still waiting on your group
No,
to
I think
start again?
we're good.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Have we got everyone back? I think all these empty chairs were empty before we left, so I
Except
think
for
we're.
Director Onslow. Has anyone seen Director Onslow? Because I don't think she was here this morning either. Not yet.
No, she wasn't.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
All right, so thank you very much, everyone. Ms. Ellison, please continue.
Thank you very much. It was hard to discern when the bells started ringing for you all because you were muted, so it was lovely for those of us online. I was talking about current bylaw and board policies. You can see them listed here. There is the existing board remuneration bylaw, which we are following. There is a previous bylaw that needs removing or updating. And then we have a variety of board policies that talk about expenses for accommodations, airline tickets, attendance, and then our general board expense policy. So we can tick forward to the next slide. Thank you, Marnie, which I've largely covered around the conversation. We've drafted a new bylaw that would incorporate all of these items with the intent not being to overhaul the system in which we're working in, but to try and simplify it, clarify it, and enhance that transparency and understanding for ourselves, for the board, and for the public. So we can actually move on to the next slide quickly, and then we'll get right into it. I just wanted to share with you where we did do a lot of work, and also acknowledge and thank Kara Wright, Marnie Jeremiah, Carla Fox for their tremendous efforts in helping me pull together the stuff. I'm the one presenting it to you, but by far not alone in the work that went into researching and understanding an overall practice. So we'll carry on to discussion and decisions section, and the next slide already will just, I'm sorry, Marnie, I'm going to make you jump right through. So remuneration, next slide, language revisions. So when we look at remuneration, some primary changes that I'm proposing we do or add into the bylaw is that we write language in there that requires the bylaw be reviewed every 2 years. We clarify the reasons or how we do the indexing or increasing directors' remuneration. The current bylaw suggests that we follow the BC Consumer Price Index for the year prior and simply apply that increase to the director remuneration. A review of other places suggests some regional districts are moving to place a maximum on that with review. So it may be that what I've proposed here is that the remuneration is increased according to BC CPI for the prior year up to a maximum of 3%, 4%, something like that. So that's an idea. And the third piece that we've added into this draft bylaw is to align with the board code of conduct policy, which states that the board may decide to impose a reduction in remuneration for individual directors found to be in violation of the board code of conduct. So that is new language that we've added. So these are 3 new items that we've added into the draft bylaw. And the next slide really is blank, because this is how I'm going to frame the kind of whole morning is let's talk about those language revisions, and then we'll move on to the next topic. So it may be a pain in the butt a little bit for the chair, so I apologize for that, but I think it will help streamline our conversations and feedback. So I open the floor then to any feedback around the 3 proposed additions of language to the bylaw.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. Does anyone have any comments? Perhaps we could just go back to that slide with the 3 proposed changes in language. Thank you. So any discussion around this? Any of these 3 points? Okay, so everyone is good with, Director Sao.
Sorry, this is kind of off the cuff, so pardon me if it's kind of like ramblings. Is there any way for us to have language in there that connects with the public? You know, some sort of input into the whole remuneration process.
Having public input into the remuneration? I don't
know.
I'm not going to even try to answer that one, because I don't think there is any mechanism by which members of the public can have input. I suspect if members of the public had input into our remuneration, they would all say we're paid far too much. I'm not really joking here. I think that would be the public input. So I'm just saying that's what I suspect we would hear is that no, we get too much pay and too many perks. Yep, Director Getz.
Thank you. This information would be FOI-able or available online, would it not? It would be for the public to view, I'm assuming. At some point.
Through the chair, yes, the remuneration bylaw and policies are all publicly available. In addition, there is financial reporting and posting that happens quarterly through the TNRD website. So all of that information is already out there and available on the amount of expenses and the policies that guide them.
I have Director Sarai, Director Grenier, and then Director Stamer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, it says it requires review every 2 years. My concern would be, I don't know when this is going to be implemented. I'm looking at the report, but I sure wouldn't want it to be right before the election. If it can be the middle of our term, if that can be worded that way, the middle of every 4-year term would be adequate. I think it wouldn't be fair to do it right when you get elected back to the board or the last year of the board. Same reason being the public's going to look at it very unfavorably.
Thank you. Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologize for being late and starting the fire alarm. And I may be jumping the gun here, so please tell me if I am, but when I read the proposal that we're discussing today, it seemed to marry remuneration with reimbursement. And and it was very long, and it seemed to be trying to do a whole lot of things at the same time. So I went back and I looked at the council's minutes when they put this policy in place, and their paragraph jumps out that I think it's useful for our new board to consider in why they did what they did. It says, secondly, sections concerning board expenses have been removed, separating them instead into board policy 1.1.16 and leaving this bylaw to be concerned with remuneration only. That meaning leaving the 2771 remuneration only. On review, staff have found this to be a common best practice among other local governments, with the advantage being that each document can be kept shorter and more easily read and understood, providing greater clarity and public transparency. This is a key governance goal of the TNRD. When I read that paragraph, I was saying, yeah, these two things start with the letter R, remuneration and reimbursement, but they're very different things. And when we start to put these things all in one comprehensive agreement, I think we get mixed up with things that we're being compensated for a service being performed and things that were being reimbursed for something that we bought on behalf of the TNRD within the parameters of the TNRD guidelines. And it's just simply a transactional exchange. And now we're starting to say this is a taxable item. In this document, later on, we get into $1,000 and it's taxable, and we get this that's taxable. And really those are dealing with reimbursement items. So I rather prefer when the whole dust settles, I rather prefer to have a discussion and a document that deals with remuneration and a document that deals with reimbursement. And so that's my first comment about that. The second is that when I read this document, the previous board seemed to be saying, we want to get this out of this constant. Is 4% enough? Is 3% enough? Is whatever it is enough? They pointed, I think quite wisely, to a guideline that is a third-party guideline, a percentage increase that's tied to inflation reported by other people, and said, that's something we can hang our hat on. That seems to be a reasonable way to go. And I don't have a problem with revisiting the policy, but I think it's important to remember why they picked that, so that we weren't all sitting here saying, is 4.5 right? Is 4.25 right? Is 3.25? It's the number that is produced by a third party that's related to inflation. If we've got the base amount right, then we should just be increasing according to inflation. If we've got the base amount wrong, sure. If we're not being paid enough, then we should do something about it. But I didn't hear at the electoral area board when this issue came up, and sorry for the municipal directors that didn't get to see that, but there was quite a discussion, but it was about reimbursement of expenses mostly, and then about the even application of this policy by staff. I don't think it was about we want an increase or we want an increase beyond guidelines. And it seems that in the process of this document, which I'm sure is well intended and intended to put us into a better position, I don't think it's quite getting us there. I don't think it's quite hitting the mark. I have other thoughts, but I'm going to stop right there because I've taken a lot of time here, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Director Stamer first and then Director Laird. Director Stamer,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Yeah, yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Couple of quick points. If we're paying attention, this is our public forum right now. This is a public meeting. If there's any questions to that effect from the public, that can be answered. And I totally agree with Director Grenier in why the previous board was trying to have accountability and transparency in this process. It's unfortunate that I wasn't aware of the conversation in regards to remuneration, because I looked through the documents and I came to the same conclusion, because as a municipal director, I do not get reimbursed on expenses the same way as an electoral director does. And I really don't want to get into the weeds with this stuff because it's a fairly comprehensive document, but I totally agree with what Director Grenier has said, is that it should be separated. There's a difference between remuneration for expenses and what we're getting paid for in our duties. So I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
You, Director Laird.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When Director Grenier pointed out what he felt should be a change, does he make a motion and we support that change now, or do we wait right till the end of the document and then go back and try to remember everything that transpired? Should we not be making a motion on what Director Grenier is suggesting now? Because otherwise we're going to get lost.
Through you, Chair Roden, the presentation set up in a way that it goes in chunks. So we're starting with remuneration, so we can discuss remuneration, and then it'll go piece by piece, and we can wrap it all up in the middle. And we are taking notes all the way through, so we'll know exactly where we were, if that makes sense.
I think the question is, though, do we need a motion to say, for example, I'm just ballparking here, that we have two separate bylaws, one dealing with remuneration, one dealing with reimbursement? Do we need to make that motion? And if so, at what point do we make it?
I don't believe we need to, but Ms. Ellison, do you have a thought on that?
My thought is at this point for committee of the whole, we're garnering feedback. This isn't anything that's going to be formally approved or put forward by the board at this point. So my suggestion or recommendation would be to walk through it, garner all of that feedback, and then we can come back to the board with a revised document or documents based on the feedback we've got here today. I'm not sure we're at that stage of requiring formal motions to amend as we go, but I'll let corporate officer chime in if I'm wrong too.
Mr. Corporate Officer?
Thank you, Chair. As my colleagues have noted, essentially the purpose of this meeting today is a conversation. We're very much looking for feedback from members. So it's always an option for elected members to make resolutions to instruct staff to do things if you really feel strongly that you have to and you want to get that on the record, but it's not necessary at this point. We're looking to have your feedback. Copious notes are being taken on everything that's being said, and if there's a strong understanding of what's needed, then that's completely appropriate at this time as well.
Thank you. Is that Director Laird? Do you have a follow-up?
I guess the problem I have with that is we didn't have whether we don't have any show of support for that recommendation that came from Director Grenier. So how do we record that the ones that are for and against changing that? Because if we don't have a record of I'm a strong believer if there's a resolution that should be made and voted on, and otherwise it could possibly get lost. And I think that's important as part of good governance, is to, when there's a something like Director Grenier just indicated was important, to separate into two separate, bylaws. I think it should be recorded, that it was supported by the board or not supported by the board. Otherwise, the staff is going to be doing a lot of work, if it's not supported at this particular moment. It might get dropped and lost. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Stamer, is that a legacy hand or do you have another point? He's gone.
Sorry, sorry, I've got to switch that.
All right. Ms. Ellison, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Through the chair, if we are going to do formal motions, what I am thinking is there will be information throughout the presentation that may add value to making that decision. So there were a few comments through the chair from Director Grenier in regards to taxability, in regards to some other items that I do think need to be covered, that may or may not shift how people are viewing or perceiving. So if we do want to do that process of a formal motion, I may recommend that we wait until the conclusion of walking through everything, and then staff can do their best to try and keep track of key questions that we need to go back on and get formal input.
Okay, so is everyone all right with saving any motions or formal resolutions until the end, until we've had a chance to go through the entire presentation and discussion to see if anything changes along the way? Director Graham?
I'd be in favor of seeing how the board supports the motion that Director Grenier would like to bring up. What's it going to hurt to see?
Now, can we, if having a formal motion and voting for or against it is the nuclear option, is a simple show of hands enough at this stage? Would we just be able to ask a straw poll? How many people are at this stage in favor of splitting into two bylaws, one loosely remuneration, one reimbursement? Is that enough? All right, who's in favor? Hands up. Would anyone be opposed to splitting it into two separate bylaws? We have one hand. Director Stamer, is that your hand voting against? It's hard to tell, but overwhelming majority are in favor.
Can I just explain why?
Certainly.
I'd just like to see the report first before I make a decision on the issue. Thanks.
I would suspect that if at the end of this meeting, there is a sentiment to go back and people have changed their minds, they can certainly indicate that. But just at the beginning of the meeting, straw poll, and thank you, Director Lepso, for that. And people might change their minds throughout the course of the next couple of hours.
Exactly.
So on the original question, which was the language revision, regardless of where this language ends up in what sort of bylaw, whether it's one amalgamated or whether it's two separate or what that looks like, what does everyone think of the language? Requires review every 2 years. We've had Director Sarai point out the difficulty of doing that. I mean, really, there's two sticking points. Doing it immediately after you're elected is not a great look. Doing it immediately before an election is not a great look for anyone, whether you're planning on running again or whether you're doing a disservice to the people who are running and now are going to have to wear this. So perhaps it could be, I'm not good at math, 2023 and 2025 would be the 2 years when we're away from having just had an election and just about to have an election. So perhaps we could put language in there that it would be on the year following an election. I don't know, Director Hall, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I think if we put it into the policy and the policy itself states very clearly and eloquently that this is policy and it's something that we adhere to regardless of term, I think would stand on its own. We wouldn't have to defend it.
Director Bass?
Just to follow through on that, it doesn't matter when we do it, public is still going to be angry. We could do it every year. We could do it, it doesn't make any difference.
So everyone is all right in principle with the every 2 years? Director Middleton?
Could you just change to read it midterm? Requires review midterm? And that way, you know, as elections come and go and everything changes, it's just kind of halfway through.
The only issue with that is that that would make it every 4 years.
Okay.
So we're okay with the every 2 years. Imposition of reduction in remuneration by decision of board as it relates to board code of conduct. Is everyone all right with language going in to align this with the board code of conduct? Okay. And clarifications for indexing, increasing remuneration. Just a reminder, consumer price index for last year was, I believe, 6.9%. And it does have implications in other ways as well. If the board awards itself a 6.9% remuneration increase, which is in effect what we would be doing, any negotiations with any other employees would be colored by that as well. Director Grenier?
Thank you, Chair. I also read about the board's practice in 2022 in regard to this, and I think it's worthwhile for the new directors to hear this. The board of directors' past practice was to reflect a cost of living increase in the director's annual remuneration based on CPI in British Columbia for the previous calendar year. However, in 2021, the board chose not to do so and continued with the rates in bylaw 2702/2020. This therefore is the proposed update to the board remuneration rate for the year 2022, building on the 2020 bylaw rates as if 2021 had not occurred. In other words, this whole policy was to get us out of this just before election. I don't want an increase. I want an increase, all this back and forth. It was to put us on a plane, compared us against other directors of other areas. If we were happy with that location, we would march along with an inflationary increase in along with the CPI guidance. And not surprisingly, along with what we're doing with our staff and QP workers and everybody else, it would be more or less in line with that. It's a non-political issue, no grandstanding just before an election saying, I don't want an increase on my lousy $29,000. You know, like it just didn't put us in that position. So if we are reviewing it every 2 years, if we get out of line with our base level, yeah, we're going to have a chance to identify it. And leadership is about saying we're out of line or we're in line. So I'm happy with the 2 years. I'm certainly happy tying it to a CPI number. And if I need to defend why I should get an increase or a decrease, I'll make it to my fellow board of directors and try to persuade them at that 2-year mark. So I'm really quite comfortable with the decisions that were made in 2022 regarding CPI. That's a long-winded thing.
Director Thorpe.
Maybe the short-winded part of that is, I believe they said that if there was anything that was higher than 3%, then it came to the board for discussion. And that seemed reasonable to me.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the clarifications for indexing, increasing remuneration? Which would still tie the increase in remuneration to the CPI. But if the CPI were above 3%, then it would come to the board for discussion. It would not automatically be applied, I'm sorry. Is everyone comfortable with that language? Okay. I'm seeing lots of nods. That's awesome. All right, last chance on this slide. All right, moving on, Ms. Ellison.
Thank you. We can move Marnie to director remuneration. I think that's 2 slides. Yep. So this one is largely around the levels of remuneration. It is and has been that the TNRD electoral area directors receive a different level of remuneration than our municipal directors. The TNRD rates of remuneration in 2022 were as on the slide. So for electoral area directors, 25,256. For municipal, 15,135. What we have done is compared that to a number of regional districts. You can see that average on the screen there for 30,000 and 17,000 respectively. In your committee of the whole report or package, on page 11 of that report out of the 36 pages, we have also inserted some charts which may or may not be easier for folks to read. We don't need to pull them up. Everybody has them kind of in front of them. So these are the levels of remuneration that we are providing to our electoral area and municipal directors. Maybe I'll pause there actually. Sorry, I'm going to slow us down a little bit, which maybe you'll all love or not. But let's get feedback on just this one slide before I go further around. My recommendation was thinking we leave them the same. And also to note, we have compared that RD average is to the 2022 rates. There is a potential increase for 2023 that is not applied to these numbers, but we are comparing averages from 2022. So I just wanted that clarification in there, and then I'll open the floor to feedback through the chair for these two pieces of remuneration for electoral area directors and municipal directors.
Thank you very much. I have Directors Onslow and Grenier. Director Onslow.
Thank you for that. I would just be curious, how did you choose the rural districts that you have highlighted in this? And is it every rural district in British Columbia, or have we chosen the rural districts? Thank you.
So through the chair, we reached out and did research with all regional districts in BC. We did eliminate ones from the Lower Mainland because the rates of pay are typically not comparable to our region. And then we focused on ones that have, I would say, it's hard to compare. We're always apples to oranges. We're never apples to apples, but we tried to pick ones who had relatively similar populations, geography, and total budget. So that's what we looked at. So the list in the committee of the whole package, you see those listed, the regional districts that were used for this comparison of remuneration only. And that was Nanaimo Regional District, Capital, which I think is the largest one that kind of falls a little bit on the side of orange to apple. Comox Regional District, Caribou, Okanagan, Central Okanagan, Fraser Fort George, and North Okanagan.
Okay, thank you. Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to applaud the metric comparing areas and including population as one of the key metrics. I think that another key metric would be geographic area. I don't want to get into the weeds on that, but that would be another useful comparison. But I do want to point out when I saw these charts, and I went to chart number 2, electoral area director, because I are one, and I'm looking at number 2, Capital District. So I went to the Capital District online and I pulled up the number, and lo and behold, there's $43,470 for an electoral area director remuneration. But when I go to the Capital Regional District page, which is January 2023, so it's relatively current, it says electoral area directors, they get paid remuneration $28,980. They have an expense allowance of $14,490 to get to $43,470. So when we carry $43,470 in chart number 2, what we're really saying is a capital person gets paid their remuneration and their expenses for a total of $43,470 as compared to us at $25,259. So I don't know, I didn't have the time to go through on all the other ones to see if that had been repeated or if they have it a different way, but I think the correct number for at least that comparison is $28,980 against our number of 25,256. And I think what's important, and we'll revisit when we get to the issue of reimbursement, is expense allowance of 14,490 versus the proposal of $1,000 for an electoral area director in the TNRD. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other points, just comments on this point? All right, thank you. Next, please, Ms. Ellison.
Thank you, Marnie. Feel free to move us forward. The next slide is chair and vice chair remuneration. You see a few different numbers in here because what happens is the way that this remuneration is often measured in regional districts is based on a ratio of what the electoral area directors are receiving. So that's how these are measured, and in some policies and bylaws, that's how the rate of pay is structured. So instead of saying that the regional district will pay 23,766, some policies say that the chair remuneration will be a ratio of 0.6, 0.7, 0.9 of 1 of the EA director remuneration. So that's why I'm flagging an additional number, not to confuse you, but to try and give some sense of how that works across the board. So for chair remuneration, the TNRD is at 23,766, which is slightly under our electoral area director remuneration. You can see that they're highlighted in the ratio of 0.96. If we look across at the same other RDs mentioned in the slide previous, the chairs do receive a remuneration average of higher than the electoral area director remuneration. The vice chair remuneration, the same story or structure. The TNRD currently pays our vice chair $4,731, which is a ratio of 0.19 of the EA director's remuneration. And again, slightly lower than the RD average, which the average ratio would be 0.34. So for both of those, we are slightly less than average, but we're near the middle range as well. Again, my recommendation for these was to leave them as is. Happy to open the floor for feedback on chair and vice chair remuneration.
Any comments here? No? Okay, thank you, Ms. Ellison. Next slide.
Okay, Marnie, you can move us ahead to 2023 increase to remuneration. Thank you very much. This is slightly a switch in pace, so I apologize for this, but what we're going to move to now is thinking about our existing bylaw 2711. It does state that the annual indemnities paid to the chair, vice chair, and director shall be increased annually based on CPI published by BC Stats for the province of BC for the previous calendar year. As we've pointed out this morning, the BC CPI for 2022 is 6.9%. This increase has not been applied to the 2023 rates as of now, and staff will move forward with that application of the increase, but we're looking for direction and feedback from the board on the decision of, do we want to continue with the BC CPI as a straight increase, or does there need to be discussion revision of what that CPI increase should be for board remuneration prior to us doing this? The effective date for this again would be January 1st, 2023. I'll open the floor for discussion here.
Okay, discussion. Director Grenier?
I have no problem with the BC CPI of 2022, 6.9% being applied to the current base level of directors. And I would be opposed to the proposal of staff that says that it would stay the same. Thank you.
Director Middleton?
When we look at this, we would say that this would be retroactive to January 1st, 2023. Would I be correct? That if or whatever we decide or pass is retroactive. So my question would be is, what did we budget for director and you know, the pay where it was set before, is if we come in with a 6.9%, what does that do for our budget? Because this would be retroactive, correct?
Through the chair, yes, this increase would be retroactive to January 1st, 2023. Also through the chair to Director Grenier, staff is not making a recommendation on this remuneration. This is completely for the board to revisit prior to us implementing anything. And further for Director Middleton, I do not believe an increase to board remuneration was in the budget for 2023. Our CFO has advised that any approved increases that would not be covered by unanticipated surpluses would need to be recovered in our 2024 taxation.
Thank you. I have Director Stamer, then Director Laird, then Director Graham. The hidden Director Blackwell. Director Blackwell, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was up first. You listed off a set of names and I didn't hear mine up first. Yeah, thank you. My comment would be, is there a possibility of changing this at some point? And maybe it's not right now, but we work on maybe a 3-year average of CPI or elected term of CPI. Just doing budgeting on anything with government contracts that I did in the past, speed bumps are not your friend when you're doing local government or government contract budgeting, even if your expenses vary 1 year high to low at the next year. And I know this isn't standard business practice, but it does work very well for keeping a steady budget on your taxation. And I think moving to say sort of a 3-year average of CPI would help smooth that curve. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Laird.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I always have a problem with percentages because it doesn't reflect the actual amount of dollars that we're talking about. When you look at the our overall wages that are charged to the whole of the EA area, what is the exact dollar amount we're talking about for 10 directors to have a 6.9% increase to their existing wage line? It makes it a lot more comprehensible to me to understand the dollars. You know, I would like to know that amount.
So for all 27 directors, a 6.9% increase.
Well, it could be all.
Because the increase would apply to everyone. Yeah. Okay. Director Graham and then Director Rain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I completely support Director Grenier's 6.9 CPI. And why wouldn't we? Gas prices have increased. Homes, the cost of homes has increased. Tire repairs for our vehicle, everything has increased. We need to keep up with it. And if we want to encourage young people to join the local government, we need to show that it's worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Rain.
Sorry, yeah, I'm a bit confused. I thought if it's over 3%, we debate it, and I guess that's what we're doing now. My caution would be, there seems to be a lot of concern about public response or reception of the increase. 6.9 when we have to negotiate for staff and we have to send a message to the taxpayer who pays our bills, I think is over the top. You know, I'm comfortable with, you know, 3% or somewhere there, but 6.9 sends the wrong message. Sends the wrong message to anybody working for the TNRD. It sends the wrong message to the taxpayers who've put us here. I mean, everybody's fighting to get inflation down. And The other side, we say, well, inflation's high, we need more money. I've often thought that politicians and bureaucrats should be paid inversely to the rate of inflation. And then the federal government wouldn't be spending billions more than they have. You know, we get inflation down very quickly. I definitely would not support 6.9.
And someone from staff, please feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that what we could do or what is being discussed is the possibility of tying director remuneration to the CPI as long as the CPI rate is below 3%. If CPI goes above 3% to say 6.9, that would then come to the board to make a decision if we want to continue to go with CPI or whether we want to cap it at 3%. We would have language saying it is CPI or 3%. If CPI is more than that, it comes to the board for discussion. The first part would be automatic if it stays below 3. If it goes above 3%, then it comes to the board for discussion, and we would be able to make our cases for whether we felt that 6.9% or whatever it was justified or not. So I think the question is whether to have that language in there to say that the remuneration will be capped at 3%. Anything above that will come to the board for discussion.
Thank
Director
you.
Middleton, and
Well-
then Director Hall.
I agree with Chair Roden on this. Is the 6.9% assumes that we're all not getting any kind of compensation back for expenses to be, you know, on the board or to travel for the board or whatever. So when we look at the 6.9, that does include things like costs of fuel and costs of this and costs of that have sent the, the numbers up so high. But the opportunity to be compensated for what are your additional costs incurred on an annual basis to do the work can be dealt with down in the expense area. So if we say you're being paid 61 cents a kilometer for use of your vehicle and inflation says we can look at making those adjustments there when we say, well, the cost of fuels has risen by this or the cost of tires or owning a vehicle. So this should really only reflect what is the value and the increase of our labor, shall we say, and not start taking it down to the cost of living as being the determining factor.
Thank you, Director Hall.
Thank you. I agree with what Councillor Middleton or Director Middleton just reported on. I was going to talk a little bit about it because I think that we started this conversation with regards to remuneration as well as reimbursement. And I think, you know, to Director Middleton's comments, I mean, if you have a remuneration of 6.9%, first off, I think it should be third party vetted as opposed to the board vetting it. And that could be highlighted in potential policy, you know, and that distance us from any sort of, increase. But when you look at 6.9% for remuneration, as opposed to, your expenses on top of that, I just think you're opening up a can of worms that is going to be hard to close. And I really would like us to look as a board, as a third party, to do a review of the increase as opposed to putting it into the board's hands.
Thank you. Director Onslow.
Thank you. I agree the optics of 6.9% are not nice. Like, and everyone would like a 6.9% raise, absolutely. But I also would look back to the consumer price index from 2015 and all the way on. And the only time it went above 3% was in 2021 and 2022. Other times it was 1.1, 1.4, 1.6, 2.3 in 2018. So we are having this discussion because it's 6.9% right now. And it has gone up, but this discussion would not have come up previous because of the 3% limit. But then all of a sudden, when it's 6.9%, nope, our policy is wrong. And I don't think that that is the way to look at this, in my opinion. I think since 2015, it's never been above 3%. And the last 2 years, it's been 3.4 and 6.9. So we are looking at the last 2 years, but the last 10 years, it's never even been a topic of discussion. And so to say in the last 10 years that, okay, it's fine, let's just go with that status quo. But now we have a problem, and I am glad that we are discussing it, and the optics of it are not right. But why was it okay for the last 10 years and it's not okay right now? Like, that's my opinion.
Okay, CFO Fox.
Good morning, through the chair to the board. As Director Rain pointed out, being in the middle of union negotiations, what the board does sets precedent for what happens across the organization. So as we're looking at the economy and inflation rates skyrocketing, CPI obviously following suit, the average increasing, it's really important to bring the discussion back at this time because it just speaks louder than just what's going to happen here at the table with the directors. So I think it's just important to note that it starts at the top and the message that we send through the organization right in the middle of negotiations.
Okay, and CEO Hildebrand did have his hand up, and then Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair Roden. Just for clarification, I think I just want to make sure everyone in the room is on the same page. That is the bylaw as it stands. There is no 3% cap. That may be in the notes that Director Grenier read, but that is the bylaw there. It would be CPI. There's no decision or nothing in the history that would say that it's capped at 3 and it would be negotiated. So I just want to make sure that the board is aware.
Ms. Ellison, you're waving frantically.
Thank you so much through the chair. I also just want to make one statement further to CFO Fox and CAO Hildebrand. It is correct. The current bylaw says we just do CPI from the prior year. It is important to note that is what the current bylaw said in 2022 and 2021 when we did not follow it either. So even when the CPI has been lower, the board has made requests and followed different decisions for increases based on their desires, decisions, wishes. The current bylaw has read this in the past. It has not been followed consistently in the past. That is why staff are proposing a maximum of something, 2 or 3%, 4% to bring back to the board for discussion, because inevitably the board has been discussing this in prior years, even with the current language not allowing for discussion. And I fully echo what CFO Fox said. Although we are not currently in negotiations, our QP collective agreement does expire December 31st, and other local government municipalities in our area are actively negotiating, and we hope to be soon as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Grenier, Director Smith, and Director Sal, and Director Rantan.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Fox, can you remind me what we approved with our staff, what the percentage increases were so that we can assess that relative to the 6.9?
Through the chair, I could
Yeah, there
speak
you
to
go.
that. Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to Director Grenier, we recently completed negotiations with our BCGEU staff collective agreement. The percentage they agreed on, it was a 3-year deal that started this January 1st, 2023, was 2% plus a 60 cents per hour increase. And that would be the same for 2024. And then in 2025, we did 4%. So 2% plus 60 cents, again, 2% plus 60 cents. And then for 25, a 4%.
Just supplemental to that, that was on a base salary of what?
It's not that simple. They have a chart of salaries that ranges depending on the position they own. I would say the average salary, anecdotally for our BCGEU group is probably around $33, $34 an hour.
But just on that, we are talking about a base EA director of 25,256 and a municipal director of 15,135. So when we talk about percentages and we talk about 60 cents and we talk about some of these relative numbers, I think Director Laird pointed out that these percentages, they should be relative. Perhaps it's useful to look at what the dollar figure is. So we're really looking from going to a 6.9% increase. I think you said 3% was 750. So a 3% increase on a EA director is $750 for the 10 directors, $7,500 on an $83 million budget that we have to administer. And it would be even less for a municipal director. So I think that we have to keep in mind, yes, percentages, yes, setting an example, but I also think we have to look at what we're applying a percentage to. Just food for thought.
Thank you. And just to remind everyone keeping score at home, we have Directors Smith, Sow, Ranta, Laird, and Hamer Jackson. If your name is not on that list, please put your hand up now if you want to speak. Director Smith.
I just wanted to make a quick point. When I ran for this position, at no time did I indicate to any of my constituents that I was going to operate at below average in representing my communities. And I don't think any of the people that voted for me would be happy to know that I'm being paid below the average of what all the rest of municipalities are, or the rest of regional districts. So I think this is an opportunity for us to at least catch up a little bit and hold our head a little bit higher and feel that we're worth what we're doing out there. I don't like seeing that I'm being paid below average when I know I'm not operating at below average.
Thank you, Director Sow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Reflecting on Director Graham's comment earlier about attracting, younger generation in future elections, I wholeheartedly share that sentiment because during election, just chatting with friends, I know such and such person with many expertise and thinking that that person would make such a great, EA director. And one of the comments my friends made was, joking, but I think it's true. He's not stupid enough to, take on that kind of pay and give up his, day job for that. So, one comment is, for the pay, it's not just about us. It is the people who will sit in this chair who, I think the last local election cycle, there were, a bit more interest, but in years past, like there's less and less interest in local government or politics, I suppose, elected officials. So I think that aspects of consideration for increasing our remuneration, we have to drive the message. Yes, the optics look not good, but it's also our job to communicate with our constituents too, to make them see the case that we're doing this not for us, but the people who want to should get into local government. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And if I may, I don't know how many people here went to the Breaking Barriers session on the Monday at UBCM. A consistent theme that came up there. It was aimed at women and minorities, LGBTQ people trying to be in politics or get into or stay in politics. But a theme that came up consistently, and I think male elected officials would say the same thing, was one huge barrier was the pay. People looked at, except in the very rare exceptions of big cities, they looked at what you get paid for to be a mayor, a councillor, or an electoral area director in regional districts. And they said, why would I give up my time to do that? Because I can't afford to live on that pay. And I will be basically doing a full-time job. So just throwing that out there, that is seen as a huge barrier to people remaining in politics and to getting into politics in the first place. We have Director Ranta.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I don't know where this 3% came from, except I'm seeing it on the page in front of me. In my opinion, over the last couple of years, it's pretty clear that the central banks in the United States and Canada have been targeting a 2% inflation rate. And, you know, obviously interest rates have gone from 1/4 or 1/2% up to 5% or thereabouts in order to try to achieve this 2% inflation rate. So in my opinion, the language regarding annual indemnities should read that the indemnities paid to the chair, vice chair, directors shall be increased annually at 2% or the cost of living if it's greater. And that greater increase could come to the board for approval, but I think it should just say 2% on an annual basis that your remuneration goes up, and unless the CPI is higher in the previous year. That's the way I would look at it, and I think that's the way we do it in Cache Creek, where all the men are men and the women are good looking.
Thanks, John. I'm gonna move to Cache Creek.
There you go.
All right, we have Director Laird next, and then Director Hamer Jackson and Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The comment about having a third party, a disinterested person, look at our overall compensation and what would come from a non, just let them look at it and decide what our wages should be. I don't think there's any elected local government that actually uses a third party. It's done very similar to what we're doing. We get recommendations from staff. They do the comparisons, and then it's up to us as directors to decide what we want, and we have to vote on it. And it's a very difficult decision to make when you're having to vote your own wage increase without that third party recommendations on where we should be. And I've been doing this a lot of years, and this is one of the hardest things that an elected local official has to decide. What is my value to the community? You know, and we have to decide that we don't have the opportunity. We don't have a union to bargain for us. It's not there at all. If you could figure out a way for a third party to be involved, we would get the third party recommendations coming to us, and we'd look at what they're suggesting, and it would be a lot shorter conversation to decide how much we're worth as elected officials. The other thing that I don't know if all directors know this, but if you vote not to support an increase in your wages, and the rest of the board votes to approve it, those that oppose the increase in remuneration automatically get paid the same amount as what the other board member says, yes, I'm worth this amount of money. We went through this a couple of years ago, and you don't have to take, if you're voting against not taking your remuneration, you have the choice of not taking it or donating it to a charity of your choice. And one of the previous directors decided he didn't want to take the extra money. So as far as I know, he donated it to a charity of his choice. The other thing is if you don't accept it, that particular area director, that's where his wages are. So when the next director comes along and runs for election and he thinks he's gonna get paid the same as everybody else, he's not. Because the previous director voted against increasing his pay. So it's not a, it's fairly complicated when you vote for or against this particular issue. You know, if you vote for it, you get your remuneration. If you vote against it, you still get your remuneration. So, third party, if we could ever figure that one out, would be great. Thank you.
Director Hamer Jackson?
Yeah, I'm the same thought. Third party, you're gonna have to pay a third party too. We have staff, we have 27 directors. The end of the day, getting a third party to try to deflect what decision you're making, I think is a little bit bizarre, but I think that at the end of the day, we've got to own it. It doesn't matter if it's with the public, the media, whoever it is, we have to own it. So I think that as a whole, a board as a whole, and I hope that it's not a weighted vote when it happens, is it? So I think that the decision as a board, you got to respect that when you have 27 directors. And like I said, a bunch of staff and things like that, I see no point in hiring a third party. Like I said, I think it's good that we got to own it. So, and some of us may not need it, but some may need it. And, just speaking here with having other people getting on board, I think is a really good idea. So that's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Thorpe.
Thank you. Quick little math, that 60 cents an hour, if we were looking at somebody that made, say, $33 an hour, we're looking at a 1.8% increase. So with the 2%, that comes to 3.8. If we figure that person that's making $33 an hour would make about $64,350 a year, the 3.8% comes to $24,4530. As opposed to, say, your 3%, where you'd be looking at maybe $750, just a point of clarity.
Thank you, Director Sarai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to, the third party thing, I totally understand it. It could get cloudy, but at the city of Kamloops, I think our remuneration for our mayor and council is based on, and nobody has to come in and fight for money. It's an average of 5 communities like-minded. And I'm thinking if that's something, I think I saw it in the report, the average of the RDOs throughout our district, if you can look at the average and then set that pay scale according to the average, then there's no third party involved. There's no giving yourself a raise. You're getting the average of what everybody else is getting in the province. So I think that's one way to ease it up for our staff, to make it simpler, that there's a formula and it doesn't put onus on us that this is what we deserve. This is what we deserve because this is a going rate.
Thank you. And Director Middleton and then Director Bass.
This is not regarding our remuneration or anything else, but as a director, counselor sitting around this table, Director Ranta, I found your comment that you made to be way off base. I'd like to see you apologize for making that comment. I found it very offensive.
What, the 2% comment?
No, not that comment. The men are men and the women are pretty.
Oh.
It's off base and this is not the place for it. And I was very offended by that.
I'm sorry.
Director Bass.
2 things. First of all, we're not making any votes today. This is just for feedback to Amanda, who's going to have a lot of things to deal with now. Secondly, in terms of having a third party, I'm concerned about that because sometimes you can get elected to office expecting it to be this and it ends up being that. You can get elected thinking it's going to be an easy job and then you discover you're surrounded by chaos. And I'm going back to what happened in 2018 when most of us who were elected to the and ended up on the TNRD did not expect to be dealing with the things we were dealing with at the time. So if you're going to have a third party, and I think we're going to have to come up with really specific parameters on how they would possibly adjudicate what the job is, because it sure wasn't what I thought it was going to be last term.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other points? So just again, for those keeping track score at home, we are set to get a 6.9% increase to remuneration as things stand, because that is what the policy states, or the bylaw states. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that is correct. We will get a 6.9% increase because that's what it says, that we will go by CPI, and that was what CPI was for 2022. Okay. So we do have the option of bringing in language that says, this would go back to Director Onslow's point many points ago, that until fairly recently, the CPI was chugging along at a fairly reliable, dependable 1.15, 1.52%. So of course, we didn't have these discussions. If we did bring in language indicating that it would be CPI, but if CPI is above 3%, then it will come to the board for discussion and a vote. Then that would deal with these anomalous years where it suddenly goes from being an average of 1.25% to being 6.9%. We would still have the options of giving ourselves a 6.9% increase in line with CPI and the bylaw, but we would have to discuss it first. It would not be an automatic 6.9% increase. So we do have that option to bring in language that if CPI goes above a certain amount, it will trigger it coming to the board instead of it being automatic. Ms. Ellison?
Correct. You've summarized it correctly, is what we're proposing. So that's why it's slightly confusing in two separate issues. One is your remuneration increase for 2023 based on the current bylaw. Current bylaw says you get CPI, which is 6.9%. We wanted to do a double check with the board that remains the decision and directive of 2023 increase equal to 6.9%. Second item is future bylaw, and how do we amend language in there to more accurately reflect the desires of the board, to include potentially a proposed maximum that would be automatically implied and then instead brought to the board for discussion. So I think I have good feedback on both those items separately and move forward at the discretion of the chair.
All right, thank you very much. Director Grenier, I think, and then we will wrap up this discussion, have a very brief break and then return.
Just so we can put real numbers to it, a municipal director with a 6.9% increase would go to $16,179. And the mean of municipal directors per chart one is 17,734. So I don't know if municipal directors feel they're being underpaid, overpaid, or paid correctly, but it's 16,179. Electoral area directors would go to $31,275. The mean on chart two is $30,489. And the median, well, median is a different number because it's 25,496. But if the mean is the appropriate measure, it would be roughly $750 more than the mean. Hope that helps.
Thank you. Director Blackwell, quickly, then we're going to take a break here in the room.
Yeah, I realize we're not voting on anything today. I would still like to see, as earlier suggested, that we start moving this over a 3-year average. We're doing that sort of thought planning when we do union contract negotiations, where we purposely set out negotiating percentages year by year. I think these hiccups and bringing it back for public discussion on a regular basis does nothing but make us look bad when those numbers are high. I think the public perception on this discussion today, considering how nickel and dime sometimes we are on discussion of budgets for various departments, yet we come here and we're absolutely willing to increase our wages at a higher rate. I really question how that's going to be perceived, and I really question how that is working in practice. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We'll have a 5-minute break and then return. Thank you, everyone. There's always one guy, says Director Sarai. As all sorts of people scramble for their seats. Just to let everyone know, there will be a recap at the end. There will be no test, but there will be a recap at the end for those who are wondering, okay, what's this 3 hours of talking going to result in, and where are we going from here? Just put your minds at ease right now. All right, if we want to move along, Ms. Ellison, thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel like I need a travel gavel myself just to keep me on track. Where I just want one thing to clarify before we move ahead. There was a comment through the chair earlier around if we vote differently around the pay, we can opt to have our pay at different levels than others and or donate some of that pay. I want to clarify that the role of the board here is to make a decision on the levels of pay for the positions. So electoral area director, municipal director, chair, vice chair, those are the positions that we have. The board gives staff direction on the level of pay for those positions. We implement that level of pay for those positions. There is not such an ability for folks to say, I want this amount, I want X amount, or I want Y amount donated to another charity. Payroll and staff will provide payment at the level of pay for the position as decided by the board. Board members may then opt to donate or make different decisions with the remuneration that they receive, but we wouldn't be setting up different systems in place to accommodate for different donations or levels of pay based on individual preferences. So I'll move us along. So sorry for that. Thank you, Marnie. If we can move to the travel time remuneration slide with the content in it. It's one more. Yep. So travel time remuneration. Board remuneration is always comprised of two parts. At some points in time, it has been melded together as one, and some points in time, it has been separated out. So the separation here is around travel time and your indemnity. So this, when I say travel time remuneration, what we are talking about is the amount of pay you will receive for time spent in transit. This travel time remuneration is not expenses for transit. It is the amount of time one spends in transit. Current bylaw 2711 provides for language around this. I am not suggesting any change to language around eligibility, around when it gets paid. So what we're saying is that it remains paid the same. It's paid when people drive or spend time driving. The current bylaw has a significant chart in it that dictates a dollar amount per range of kilometers. It's not a consistent range of kilometers. It kind of ranges between 30, 40, 50, 60 kilometers with different dollar amounts within it. It is somewhat difficult to follow. So what I am proposing as a change is that we move that to a payment of $30 per hour for time spent traveling. It would be a minimum of 30 minutes, which aligns with the current chart because you don't get paid unless you have a minimum of 30 kilometers. So it's roughly equal there. At maximum of 6 hours. The current chart maxes out at, I think it's 590 hours. Sorry, I don't have multiple screens today, so it's somewhat similar. And then we pay it in increments of 0.25 hours or 15 minutes. So that's the change that I'm recommending, just to make it a little bit easier in terms of understanding for staff and transparency that this is travel time remuneration, not per kilometer payments. I think when we see a per kilometer chart, there's a gut reaction to say, how much am I getting per kilometer? And we go to expenses, but this is not an expense. This is a time payment. So I'm suggesting we switch the payment to a fraction of time as opposed to kilometer. So I'll stop there and get your feedback on this one for travel time remuneration.
Thank you, Director Onslow.
Thank you for that. I do see a potential issue with this because we all know how many times Highway 5 has been closed. And so a maximum of 6 hours, that's fine. But who's tracking that? So if someone is sitting on Highway 5 for 12 hours or turned around, then this doesn't work. But if you go by the per kilometer, and that seems to me to work more than by an hourly rate, because you don't know. And also even with the pipeline traffic. So I knew what I was getting per kilometer time wise, but I was not getting compensated for the 4-hour drive that it was to come into Kamloops. And that is an anomaly, and that is not going to be the standard. But I do see that tracking it by the hour will create a paper problem.
Thank you, Director Thorpe.
Another question would be, is this not going to cause increased staff time to try and track this? Whereas if we're already submitting our mileage. And so what we have now is currently based on that mileage. If we start now having to submit an hourly, like I'm come from the Lytton area, it takes me a minimum of 2 hours to get here, but it can take me 3 or 4. Am I going to have to submit that every time I come in? And is that not going to increase the amount of work the staff is going to have to do?
Thank you. I've got Director Middleton, and then if anyone has an answer for Director Thorpe.
My question on this will be, this would be based on, not on remuneration, but reimbursement, correct? Or so being the $30 an hour, is that now a taxable amount? And how is that being applied to the sort of the compensation, I guess, or remuneration for directors?
Ms. Fox or Ms. Ellison, thank you.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. To answer both the questions, it's good feedback, Director Onslow and Thorpe. I appreciate that, and we'll take it away and review and consider further with the team. And for Director Middleton, this travel time remuneration is not a reimbursement. This is payment for time. So it is taxed just like your annual indemnity or your regular remuneration.
I've got CEO Hildebrandt and then Director O'Connor.
If I could just add for some clarification, and Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, but this calculation is usually done once at the beginning of the year, and it's based on where you live and where you come to meetings. And it's just all rolled up then into your indemnity. It just pays you for your time, but it doesn't take into account to what Director Onslow is saying, where you're maybe stuck on a highway or something like that. Am I wrong in that, Amanda, or that's how I understood it?
You're correct in your understanding. Yep.
Thank you. I have Director O'Connor and then Director Blackwell. I do see your hand up in Zoom land.
So I think Scott just answered my question. But so does this replace mileage then?
No, not at all. Completely separate. This number, if I could just add, would be based in it's part of your indemnity. So all the meetings that we book for the year, all the committee of the wholes, all those meetings, all rolled up into your indemnity. And part of it is the time traveled, and that's just a component of your total indemnity.
Director Blackwell.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. And this applies to municipal directors as well, is the only thing, because I think you just basically answered my question.
Director Middleton.
So just to be clear right now, we are not compensating directors coming in for any of their travel other than it being captured in the per kilometer charge that they are expensing. Am I correct?
There are two things that are currently happening that will continue to happen. So one piece is all directors receive as part of their annual indemnity. So earlier when we showed you that 15,000 and 25,000, that 15,000 and 25,000 gets added to more remuneration for your time spent driving. That's this here. So we are paying you for your time to do the job, and we are paying you for your time to drive to the job. And then further on, we will talk about expenses. So expense reimbursements as it relates to travel. So separate, and they both are happening.
You have a supplemental, Director Middleton?
Yes, so just a quick question then. If you're pre-calculating out of, meetings, that are scheduled and, and you're allocating, or you were saying that your travel allowance or part of your remuneration is based on that travel, what happens if you don't travel? What happens if somebody's missing meetings, not showing up? Attending meetings by Zoom as opposed to traveling in for meetings and so forth. So is this something that's tracked and then calculated out and paid on a monthly basis based on the meetings that you actually attended?
Correct. Travel time remuneration as per the current bylaw and in the proposed is only paid when you travel to the meetings. So it is only, so we are tracking it separately. It's paid bi-weekly. That's when board of directors are receiving remuneration. And the travel time remuneration is only paid when you actually travel. So if you attend via Zoom, we are tracking that in our attendance, and then you would not receive that travel time remuneration.
Thank you, Director Bass, and then Director Onslow.
Thanks. Just to clarify then, if an alternate director comes in and travels in to represent a director, would it then be built into their remuneration for that meeting?
Thank you. Alternate directors receive compensation through different means. They're not entitled to the travel time remuneration, but they would receive expenses.
All right, so that Director Bass just said that's not fair. So that's something that we could revisit in a different time and place if we felt that that was not indeed fair. CEO Hildebrand.
Just for clarity, though, they do receive the meeting fee. Is that what you're getting at, Director Bass? They get the 170.
No, I'm getting at, and I'm not going to use I'm just going to use Director O'Connor as an example. She doesn't come in for one meeting. She sends her alternate. Had she come in, that $30 would have been built into her travel time, but her alternate is not getting the same amount of money for making exactly the same trip. And I don't see how that's fair. And I didn't mean to mutter it. I'm sorry.
I've got really good hearing. Okay, so that could be a discussion for another time and place. I have Director Onslow as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I just feel that we are trying to fix a wheel that's not broken in this one. Because if it is tied to kilometers and the remuneration is tied to those kilometers in some way, this is like it's already being paid out, and it should, and we could look at alternate directors when they submit their kilometers traveled, they should just get the pay for their time in there that is determined. So in this one, I don't agree with changing it to tracking it by the hour or anything. I think it should still be tied to kilometers.
General consensus seems to be, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Keep it tied to kilometers. Nods, lots of nods. All right, let the record show there were lots of nods. All right, so move on to the next one, please, Ms. Ellison.
Thank you, Marnie. We can move right ahead to expenses. And as I mentioned earlier, I was just going to, I won't, but we can move ahead, Marnie, is that the TNRD website in the financial reporting section does already and has for some time report on our expenses quarterly. So you can go on there and see the expenses for senior management team and the board of directors, which is posted quarterly on our website. I'll move into areas where I am recommending changes now. This, I think, is important when we talk about the concept of either splitting remuneration and expenses or leaving them together. I'm happy to go with the board's direction decision at the end of the day if we do decide to keep two separate documents, one around remuneration, one around reimbursement of expenses. My request would be, in consideration of that, is to still have good conversation, because I think we could potentially move to having one policy around expenses as opposed to the 4 or 5, which we currently have. So I'd like you to continue the conversation with the possibility that this could still just be one policy on expenses, even if it's not combined with the bylaw. So the first one that I wanted to chat about is board policy 1.112, cancellation of attendance at conferences, meetings, or events. This policy allows for a board member who does not attend an event to appeal to a tribunal consisting of the chair, vice chair, and CAO to decide if the TNRD should cover costs of missed conferences, meetings, or events. So when we have accommodations, travel bookings, etc., for missed conferences, meetings, or events, currently, the board member that missed can appeal to this tribunal to have the costs covered by the TNRD. Any policy where there's just this potential for an appeal group without some clear guidelines can create some unfair practices. So what I'm recommending in this case is that we narrow that down, and what we do is we build in language that says the only circumstance in which the costs would be covered by the TNRD is in the case of the death of an immediate family member. And eliminate this need for an appeal to a tribunal that can look at each individual circumstance on its own accord and potentially cause some inconsistency in decisions. I'll open that up to conversation and feedback to set that one slide.
Prior to this, I had directors Bass and Middleton with their hands up. And since we began discussing this topic, we've had directors Onslow and Blackwell. So I'll start with Director Bass.
My apologies for being too logical here, but that really is too limiting. I would interpret this to mean that if I died, my estate would have to deal with this. Now, if I was hospitalized with a heart attack, I would be covered. I would have to appeal that that charge. If I had COVID and was not allowed to travel, I would not fall under this bylaw or this clause. And I just find that way too restrictive, because there's so many opportunities, so many chances that people will not be able to travel beyond a family member dying. And you're just then, you're having tribunals having to decide, and maybe a very simple decision. If I'm in the hospital with a heart attack and can't go to FCM on behalf of TNRD, I'm sure Scott, et cetera, will get it. But it's just another job. Whereas we could clarify that if we would put in specific examples that exist now. And I look to COVID, for example. If you're contagious with COVID, you can't go anywhere as well. So I think you're way too restrictive here.
Director Middleton.
I just echo those comments. That's what I was going to say.
Director Onslow. Thirded, Director Blackwell, you going to fourth those comments?
I will fourth that, but I will add one other topic of discussion related to this. So quite often, in an effort to travel as economically responsibly or cheaply, let's just call it cheaply, on behalf of whatever board I'm on, I quite often book flights, but I do not book travel insurance or cancellation insurance for those flights. What is the thought of the room? Since there is another remedy for recouping costs for booking travel or cancellation insurance, because as Director Bass said, there are circumstances other than death that we have a responsibility not to get on an airplane or travel or show up in a hotel room if we are sick with something like COVID. Thank you.
Any other comments on this? The feeling of the room seems to be that saying that the only circumstances in which costs would be covered by the TNRD are death of an immediate family member. Not sure what the feeling of the room is on having a tribunal. I mean, it strikes me that we could either increase the number of circumstances under which someone would not be responsible for paying, which is never going to possibly include everything. Or we continue with a tribunal, which does have its own pitfalls in that you do run into possibly issues of fairness depending on the composition of the tribunal, which could change on a yearly basis. Director Laird.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering exactly how much money is being lost or costing the TNRD for not having directors attend or be where they're supposed to be. Is it a horrendous cost that we're looking at recovering, or is it worth it's getting so complicated as to why if I can't attend, I have a good reason. And that's not good enough anymore. It seems that now we have to pay if we can't attend. How are you ever going to decide when you pay and when you don't pay? You couldn't write everything down. I don't think that would compensate you. So what is our actual cost in this not functioning properly now?
Ms. Ellison?
Thank you, through the chair. I have not calculated the actual cost for missed attendance at meetings, conferences, etc. I have heard anecdotally it does happen. I think even for out of town, we had a few. I think there were a couple other circumstances this year. So just in brief recollection, kind of for 2023, I have a handful, maybe 2 handfuls of scenarios that have occurred, taken into account with Director Blackwell's comment around travel insurance. That is something that I can go back and look at more closely in terms of cost benefit analysis there. The other piece is specific examples I think will help us. So that's an option to try and include that more. And my mind also goes to a point of travel insurance will have pretty strict requirements around what is covered. So it might be a guidepost in terms of what we use there.
CEO Hildebrand and then Director Middleton.
Thank you, Chair Roden. I can just share, over the last 3 or 4 years that I've been here, I know it's probably in the thousands. There are times when we don't get communication back, when hotel rooms are booked. And we see that all the time, and it puts us in a really difficult position sometimes when if somebody doesn't show up to a meeting, we don't know they're coming to a meeting, the vendor, the hotels, the locations where we're meeting and paying for food and things like that don't give us a credit. So we have to make the decision as staff to just eat that cost sometimes. And that's the whole purpose of this being on here. So if we can just fix the communication, I think this would all go away. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it does happen.
Thank you, Director Middleton.
I think this also speaks to not just like conference fees or whatever and potential when we start talking about hotel rooms, but also, you know, catered events. Catering is expensive. And if you're planning and you think you have, you know, 40 people coming to a meeting and you plan your catering accordingly and only 20 people show up, at that point in time, you're paying for 40. So in doing this or having this policy is, how does the TNRD collect those monies back through the remuneration, or not through remuneration, but reimbursement, where you kind of end up with a red line item on your expense and you're not paid back your expenses until your reimbursement is covered off?
Through Chair Roden, I don't believe we've had a hard line on this, but I know, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Allison, but I believe in the policy, it says it will be billed back to the director. We have just not taken that hard line because there has been reasons and there has been discussions and you know, people just missed the communication or didn't follow up. So it's a really tough spot for staff to be put in when we're talking about hundreds of dollars for hotel rooms or something like that. So there's a mechanism. It's just, I'm not sure the board wants us to go down that path. And that's why we're looking for clarity. That's all.
Just for clarification, there are instances, a couple that I know of, where people miss meetings and it was not through death or illness. And the decision has been made not to pursue them, not to pursue paying back that money. However, we do need to highlight that it is cost effective. And it came up in previously today when we're haggling at an open board or board meeting about nickels and dimes somewhere. And then we are effectively spending thousands of dollars by people not showing up to things that they've said they'll show up to, and for which hotel rooms conference fees have been paid, meals have been booked, et cetera. It's not a good look. So Director Onslow.
I agree that it is not a good look, but I think that we are making more of this than what is actually happening because everybody's sitting here. If I am booked to a conference, I will do everything in my power to go and attend that conference. And it is for the odd circumstance that is probably devastating for the person to not go. And so I would be very interested to know what is that actual cost and why are we discussing this? Like, it seems to me that again, we have the wheel and that we're trying to break it, in my opinion.
Any other comments on this? CFO Fox?
Thank you, Chair, through to the board. It sometimes is difficult to bring some of these things forward where we as staff start to make those decisions to bring things forward is if staff are conflicted about the interpretation or how to make that decision. So in some of these cases, it puts the decision on the CAO and the chair to make the determination, which unfortunately then leaves it open to values, feelings, ethics. So I agree. This time he made a bad choice and someone was sick. But Jane, who also did it, but for a different reason. So it's allowing decisions to be made more at a staff level in certain cases where I think we would just like the policy clear of what the board would like and not have the determination of one individual of staff that can shift and change, which of course we're doing our best not to and apply that consistently, but there's opportunity for that to happen.
Director Middleton or Director Onslow, sorry.
I hear what you're saying, definitely, but maybe then we continue with the tribunal. And even though it might be an uncomfortable situation, I still think that in a policy, you cannot put down the reasons that someone cannot attend. And to have to pay for that because we would not, the policy would be just too many pages and we cannot cover everything. But in a tribunal and in the situation that we already have, it might be uncomfortable, but it is also the right way to go about doing something like this.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this? Director Lepso?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm just wondering, I mean, I have an alternate. So if I can't go to an event, I have an alternate, and I agree, maybe this might not be the correct language, but we need a language. I agree with staff that it's just laid out for staff. So this is a set of rules, and just to get back to it, I have an alternate. So if I can't go to an event, I get a hold of my alternate and my alternate goes.
And Director Stamer, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I've got some technical issues here. I totally agree with what Director Onslow is saying about the wheel not being broken, but it seems to me a lot of this is being brought up with staff. So let's flip it to staff. What happens if there's something that's scheduled, a staff member is supposed to go to and they don't show up? What happens there? I'd like to hear that side of the story myself, because it seems like we're spending an awful lot of time on something that isn't broken. And I appreciate what Ms. Fox had to say, but I mean, let's ask the question to staff. What happens if there's something that's scheduled and staff doesn't show up? What happens to them? Do they get money taken off their check?
Ms. Ellison?
Yes, through the chair to Director Stamer. I actually can't think of a circumstance where staff has missed an event that was booked. And staff, you know, we bring this forward not because we want to make issues out of molehills, but because it's problematic and it's not feeling good. And we have staff that are ethical and committed to integrity. And when we're waiving fees because somebody forgot and or because somebody was sick, it feels inconsistent. So we're bringing it forward to the board for your discretion, decision, direction, and happy to move forward with continuing the tribunal.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. And I think just in case anyone missed that distinction, staff are being asked to decide whether someone forgetting that something was happening for which they'd been booked and they just didn't show because they forgot. Should that be waived? The same as you would waive it if a person could not go because they were sick, because someone had died, because they had COVID, because they were in quarantine, because insert long list of reasons here. Those are the decisions that staff are having to make right now, and they are feeling very uncomfortable with that, and I can understand why they would be feeling uncomfortable. Director Onslow and then Director Smith.
I would just have to say on that comment, if someone has forgotten, that is the reason for a tribunal, is for people to be able to make that decision of you will be paying for this because you forgot and that is on you, versus your child was sick and put in the hospital but now you have to pay for this meeting. So that is the reason that I would say we stick with the tribunal, and those are tough decisions that people have to make, but you are effectively decision makers and we are decision makers and we can make that decision.
Thank you. I have Director Smith and Director Middleton.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that the tribunal takes that angst away from the staff member. So the staff member does not have to make the decision. You're gonna go to the tribunal. I'd like to know how many times that's happened in the last, or is this tribunal been working so far, and has there been decisions made? And is there a negotiation there? Like, can you go to the tribunal and say, yeah, I screwed up and I did this or I did that, or because of this, can we split the cost or whatever? I mean, is there some sort of negotiation there, or is the tribunal yes or no, and we'll tell the staff what to do?
CEO Hildebrand?
Chair Roden, can you think of, I mean, I could recall in the last couple of years, we've had probably 2-3 conversations of a cost that's come through that, you know, what should we do here? We talk through it and make a decision, but none of those have always been to simply let it go because of somebody forgetting. And I mean, I can think of a few of them that were in the $700-800 range for 2 or 3 nights hotel. So it's tough decisions, and I'm good with whatever the board would like to do. I just want to have a consistent approach. That's all. And we would do the exact same thing with staff.
So the consensus seems to be, Director Middleton, I'll let you have the last word, but the consensus would seem to be, again, don't reinvent the wheel, keep a tribunal so that there is a policy that if someone misses meetings or bookings or hotels or whatever, that there is a vehicle for that to be reviewed by someone other than staff. So taking the responsibility off staff shoulders. Okay. Director Middleton.
I suspect that there's probably repeat offenders that raise the flag of why we even have this policy in place, and, you know, to be able to enforce it. So our amendment that we still have the tribunal, I think we perhaps have built in a repeat offender policy. So maybe everybody around the table here kind of gets a pass on your first oops, but that's your pass and that's all you get. After that, then you're billed back, so that it doesn't, it's like somebody can't say I didn't know, or I didn't realize this was going to happen, or I'll do better, I'm sorry. Is that we're probably looking at, you know, I'm gonna say 10% of the people causing 90% of the problem. So which is my general rule of thumb for just about everything in life. So I think we could just keep it the way it is, but just have some sort of perhaps written in there around the one-time pass or a dollar value pass, something like that, that just set it up so that staff isn't sitting there trying to become heavy-handed over somebody who accidentally missed a meeting. But if they, you know, if they haven't learned their lesson after the first one, then perhaps some monetary punishment is in order.
CEO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Roden, and good perspective. I think this is a real small issue in the big scheme of things, but we just want a direction. At the end of the day, we're all on the same team here. We want to make sure that we're doing things consistently and fairly. We just want to make sure everyone's included, and this could all go away with just really good communication, right? I mean, sometimes things happen last minute, you can't be there, but that's when maybe the tribunal kicks in and we figure it out. But we're on the same team here. This isn't a debate or a fight back and forth. We just want to make sure we have clear direction. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we move on now
Thank
to
you.
two further items, the per kilometer expense rate, if I'm reading my.
Oh, yeah, we've got one more. Sorry, if Marnie, you can move us forward
Oh.
to board policy 114. Now this one, I just want to try and reframe because I think I'm hearing the comments through the chair, Director Onslow, that are we trying to fix something that's not broken? But a little bit of the brokenness is the fact that we have 5 different policies talking about different pieces of what's eligible for expense reimbursement and what's not. So we need to compile that into one policy. And a part of that compilation is this still what we want to do? You know, because we need to refine this and make it easier for folks to understand and make it reasonable to read and interpret and apply in a consistent manner. So although I have not had any interactions or exceptions or questions about this policy, when I read this policy 114, remuneration for accommodation prior to or following meetings, was last updated, I think, in 2013. And it basically says we will provide remuneration for accommodation prior to or following meetings if the meeting is early or late, if you're ill or there's inclement weather. That's pretty vague in my mind, and it's hard to have a reasonable, consistent application and interpretation of this policy. So what I've attempted to do here is create some language that applies the same principle into something that is easier to interpret, apply across the board. So what I'm saying as a suggestion to revise this policy and incorporate it into something different is that allowable expenses may be claimed when the time required to travel to or from meetings, to or from the director's home, in addition to the meeting start or end times, requires you having to leave before 6 a.m. or having to stay after 10 p.m. So what I'm trying to get at is if the meeting goes early or late and you have to leave before 6 or stay past 10, if you're so ill that you end up having not being able to make it home until after 10 because you came down with a wicked stomach flu, if there's a wicked snowstorm and the roads are closed and you need to stay and you're not going to make it home before 10, your reasonable expenses may be claimed. So I hope that makes sense. As I said, this is definitely not one that's broken, aside from it's one of the numerous policies that sits out here that's quite vague and could be difficult for us to interpret and apply. So I'll leave that open for feedback.
Okay, I have Director Onslow and then Director Stamer.
Thank you for that. Again, I find that this is very restrictive. So leaving the house before 6 in the morning, being the director that lives the furthest away from Kamloops, that will happen anytime there is a meeting that starts at 9 in the morning. And if I'm not going to get home until 10 p.m., I think that is too late as well, because as a woman going into being 50, I want to be in bed before 10 p.m. Thank you.
I have Director Stamer and then I have Director Thorpe. Director Stamer?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to get through this agenda. I'm wondering if maybe we can add getting a doctor's note too, because maybe that's what we need.
Except that's putting more strain on our already under pressure healthcare system. So I don't know. Director Thorpe.
I would echo Director Onslow's comments. I'm a 2-hour drive away, minimum 2 hours in good weather. If we know in the wintertime, I don't want to be leaving my house at 6 in the morning, not knowing what the weather is going to be. The night before, you don't know. I'd rather travel in the daytime, be here overnight, rather than trying to deal with the roads the next morning when you don't know what you're going to run into. And there's a lot of times the roads are closed, which means I'm not going to make it to that meeting. Now, if I'm booked to be overnight for the next night, does that now mean that I'm going to be charged for my overnight stay because I can't get through because of inclement weather?
Oh, no.
Director Blackwell.
Yeah, I was gonna ask for that point of clarification, and that, this does not apply to, if we have a meeting schedule like we had, which was yesterday regular, that there's no conflict with staying overnight, for the next day, Cal, because, and I would echo, Director Onslow and Director Thorpe's comments. I think that most of us have lobbied on highway safety. I know stating dawn to dusk would be a hard thing to go, but I could see 8 o'clock in the evening and maybe a different start time in the morning. But yeah, I'm in bed by 8:30 most days. The dog's there half an hour before me. Anyways, thank you.
Director Middleton?
I just think that we should be erring on the side of caution and safety. And I think we all acknowledge that we are not our best after 12-hour days. And that this should be limited to a 12-hour day, so that if we were to look at this, we said, 6 to 6. And then, or just allow for any kind of a circumstance that means that you can't travel on the same day that your meeting is. I just think we should not be encouraging people to start driving our highways after hours at night, or too early in the morning, because we know a lot of times road clearing does not start at 6 in the morning. So I think that is definitely not the right wording.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this point? Director Hammer Jackson?
I just think we really have to respect what these ladies are telling us, on the electoral areas that, things we don't have to deal with, but other people do.
And even Ashcroft, I know it's an hour's drive in good weather along Highway 1. In wintertime, I do not care for driving when the weather is bad, when the roads are bad. I would much rather, even though it is only an hour, even if the highway is open, to be here the night before so I can travel in the afternoon daylight, and not have to roll the dice on the roads being clear in the morning and me being able to make it in. I think it's peace of mind and it's safety, and those have to be top of mind. All right, move on to the next item, please, Ms. Ellison.
Thank you so much. So we're on to the slide per kilometer rates, Marnie. So we're switching gears to expense reimbursements. Our current board policy 1.1.16 talks about board expenses, specifies that we follow the Canada Revenue Agency rate for reimbursement of mileage, which for 2023 is 68 cents per kilometer. The 2023 rate for the BC government is 61 cents per kilometer. And again, there is a ever so minor issue here, but it's one of these small conundrums staff find themselves in that we look to you for direction on, is a lot of our grants and funding comes from BC government grants. They pay the maximum rate per BC government rate, so 61 cents per kilometer. So where we have scenarios right now, we are paying 68 cents per kilometer and receiving 61 cents in return. Again, not a big number, but a number. And how do we navigate that difference? Does it just go to general taxation for some of these programs? As I speak, it's a reminder, the board expense policy is what is referenced for all staff to use. So all staff follow these rates. So it's not specifically just the board travel. Let's take example, UBCM ViruSmart grant. Our coordinator does significant travel. We're paying 68, we're getting back 61. So I've tabled a recommendation here that we could follow the BC government rate as opposed to the Canada Revenue Agency rate. And I look forward again to your feedback.
Director Thorpe.
So I have a comment then. We've been being paid 61 cents a kilometer. That's on our rate sheets and that's what we've been going at. So who's been paid 68 cents a kilometer? I mean, where's this discrepancy coming from?
CFO Fox?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Amanda. I thought I would take the lead on this because it is just something that typically the CFO in previous years changed and set at the beginning of the year. And the way that my year went, it was something that I missed at the beginning of the year. It was identified about a month ago. And we are in the process right now of just pulling all the expense reimbursements and working out that rate difference. So if you were paid for the travel at the wrong rate, a recalculation is being done and you will get the difference for that amount. And we're in the process of doing that right now.
So no one has been paid at this point the 68-cent rate. Okay, thank you. Director Grenier.
I missed the point about what staff are getting paid. Are staff getting paid the same as we are? Okay, thank you.
So right now, everyone who's submitted any expense claims, which is everyone here, I expect, at 61 cents a kilometer, those are being recalculated at 68 cents a kilometer for every kilometer you've submitted, because currently we are guided by the CRA rate, which is 68 cents. As CFO Fox says, that was unfortunately missed at the beginning of the year, but according to our policy, we should have been being paid 68 cents. So that is being calculated for this year. However, going forward, we do need to decide amongst ourselves whether we will continue to follow the CRA rate or whether we will go with the BC government rate. Have I synopsized this correctly? Anyone? Someone? Yes. Okay. I see some nodding. That's great. Director Onslow, then Director Grenier.
Thank you for that. I actually agree with this wholeheartedly. I think that we operate in British Columbia and that our grants are in BC, and I think that this is a good change to have, is to go with the BC government rate.
Okay, thank you, Director Grenier.
I'd be happy to go with whatever rate has been decided in our labor negotiations for our staff. I don't think we should be any more or less than what we decide about our staff.
Chair, if I may, sorry, just quickly to clarify that. All of our staff collective agreements have language that says they will follow the board expense policy. So there is nothing separate for staff. They will do what you decide here today for your policy.
For myself, I think it looks a little silly for us to be going 68 when the BC government rate is 61. I think that sends a bit of a bad message to those who care to dig deep enough to see that. So I'm more than happy to go with the BC government rate. I think it's prudent for us to do so.
Thank you. So just clarification, the 68 cents is being applied because that is the current policy. So we will receive that 7-cent difference for everything this year. However, going forward, if we agree, then it will be at the BC government rate, which at the moment is 61 cents. So that will be in the future, starting in 2024. Okay. Clear as mud.
Yeah.
Any other comments on this? No? All right, and moving on, Ms. Ellison.
Yes, thank you, Marnie. You can move us to the next one, meal per diems. So our current bylaw 2711 provides for breakfast, lunch, and dinner totaling $100 per day at $25, $30, $45 respectively. I've put some other data up on there for your review, and the province of BC elected officials are entitled to $65 daily. Canada Revenue Agency defines a reasonable meal allowance of $69 daily. From the data we could gather from other regional districts, that's where I wrote, we had 11 with data on meal per diems, averaging $76 per day. Sorry, I should have noted my note there around the Canada Revenue Agency. This is one of the pieces that was highlighted earlier this morning from Director Grenier, and I need to highlight it in multiple locations here now, is we do have to revise our taxing practices. So currently your meal per diems are not being taxed, and they should be taxed on anything over what the CRA defines as a reasonable amount. So we will have to revise that practice. So currently, if we leave them at $100 per day, the TNRD would tax the $31 additional that the CRA does not define as reasonable. So that would be a change in practice for taxation purposes to align with Canada Revenue Agency. I flag that somewhat separately, but important to note. So this one, again, I'm opening just can of worms after can of worms today, but I'd like the board to chat about and give me your feedback on meal per diems.
All right, she said hesitantly, hands in the air. We've got CAO Hildebrandt, and then we've got Directors Middleton and Sarai.
Thank you, Chair Roden. Just for context, this was and for those around the table that were here last term, was a very lengthy debate with the last group. It used to be, just for clarity, I believe it was 120 total, and we pulled it back to 100, and it was a very heated debate around the table, and that's where we landed. And so just wanted to make sure that we understood where we were coming from.
Thank you, Director Middleton, then Director Sarai, Director Grenier.
I haven't put in a claim through TNRD for any expenses. So could you just answer, the current breakfast, lunch, dinner has some parameters on when you're traveling, how many meals you're actually consuming per day. So what if you were traveling and you attended an event where lunch was provided? Do you take that amount off, or are people pocketing the $30 plus they're getting their meal paid?
I can answer that if you'd like, Chair. It is done really well. We check it on our end. I know the directors are very good at it. So for example, UBCM was recently, there were dinners, there was lunches that were paid for, and it's all done properly. So it matches to what is actually used. So we're very comfortable in that.
Director Sarai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering if staff, in previous discussions, the CRA, that $69, is that something that's been there for quite a while? Are they any discussions of them increasing that with the cost of living and the cost of having a meal?
Thank you for that.
Sorry, through Chair Roden, I'm sorry. I haven't heard anything different. That may change for 2024. But we haven't heard, unless Carla, have you heard of anything? I haven't heard what their new rate is for 2024 yet.
Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. I recall reading last night, I can't put my hands on it, but the board, when they set this number, I think they matched the adjoining Caribou Regional District. I think there was a note that from the previous CFO that said that these numbers match the Caribou Regional District, which is maybe tying in with your reduction down to the $100.
Thank you, Director Middleton.
I think I'm okay with the numbers that exist. If you looked at what your actual costs and if people's, if they are receiving a lunch in along with their event they're attending or why they're traveling, because reasonably, if you have to buy your own breakfast, $25 is a bowl of oatmeal these days. And dinner for $45 is not eating high on the hog. And if you have to buy your own lunch, depending on what, whether you're spending the $30 or not. But I think if any other paid meals are reduced off that amount, I think if it's broken down into the per meal, that it's reasonable.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this point? Director Graham and then Director Hamer Jackson.
Well, I can assure you that restaurant meals have not gone down. They've increased. So I'm naturally in favor of leaving it at $100.
You, Director Hamer Jackson.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, like I told Herb, I'd bring him lunch, but all kidding aside, I think that the public perception, they're gonna think, why aren't we in line with the BC elected officials? Why aren't we in line with the CRA? And so I don't know. I would think that if you're, in line with the regional districts at 76 daily, it's gonna have a lot better look, and just my thought. It's I just think that it would be a better front page news than being that much over the elected officials of BC and things like that. Thanks.
Thank you. Just from my own experience, the days on which I have claimed breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the course of being on the TNRD board are vanishingly small. Because if I go to something like UBCM, which is really the only time that I'm gone for an entire 24-hour cycle, breakfast, lunch, and often dinner is paid for in my registration or separately, like the Silga luncheon or something. So really, I think the number of times that any given director is charging all three of those on the same day is small. So I think, to talk to Director Graham's point, the individual breakdowns and Director Middleton as well, pointing out the cost. I was looking at the cost of the breakfast menu in my hotel in Vancouver and calculating how many eggs I could have bought for the cost of a bacon and egg breakfast. Lots was the answer. So the individual amounts I think are fine, because that's really all that most people are claiming on a given day is one of those three things. Anyone else on this? Director Lipso?
I seem to be talking a bit today, but I just know every year we have an annual report and the expenses of all the elected officials are put there for the public to see. So you don't have to spend the whole $100, but every year there it is. The public can see if one director spending 5 times as much as the rest. And to me, that's the balance there for any of these extra expenses.
That was not another fire alarm, just in case anyone's looking nervous here. Thank you, Director Lipso. Director Sarai.
Yeah, just to close, Madam Chair, I just got the numbers from City Kamloops, and I remember we just put in some numbers for UBCM. So we get $80 a day. $60 is our meals. There's $10 for breakfast, $16 for lunch, and $34 for dinner. And then we have a $20 overnight package. So it comes up to $80. I'm with you, Madam Chair. I don't think I've ever claimed all three in one day. And we've never had to come back and say, oh my God, I didn't get my money's worth, or I'm shortchanged. I think, again, we get meals wherever we go to a conference, if not one, at least 2. And I'm comfortable where we're at, but with the City of Kamloops, we've never had an issue, and we're at $80 a day.
Thank you. Anyone else on this point? CEO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Roden. From a staff perspective, I think this is also reasonable. I think it's been working well, and I agree with everything that's been said. I do even know a few examples of board directors in this group that choose to buy yogurt and fruit for to have in their hotel room, and may spend $15 and don't have that option, so they take the lowest denominator and go 25, where perhaps they had that for dinner. So we're always I know this group is very conscious on expenses and costs, and I'm not concerned, and the staff seem like it's been working well and it's reasonable.
Thank you. Any further comments? All right, on to the next point, Ms. Ellison. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're getting close. We've got
apologies. I see Director Blackwell. Was that a legacy hand? Oh, it's vanished.
It was, most of it was answered. Yeah, along Mr. Hildebrand's comments there. Yeah, sometimes what's tailored to at the conferences does not meet dietary needs. But yeah, I was going to float the ugly can of worms of if directors are uncomfortable with, say, I quite often find a McDonald's breakfast at $12. Can I submit the actual receipt instead of claiming the set amount, or is that a royal pain in the tush?
CFO Fox, if someone were to submit a breakfast claim for $12 instead of 25, would that be with the accompanying receipt, would that be a complete pain in the backside?
I think we're encouraging people to follow the per diem. However, it might take a little bit more work to expense that and follow it, but we do kind of based on the board. At this point, it's not overly burdensome for us if a director wants to do that.
Okay, so a director who only spends, say, $12 on breakfast and is uncomfortable collecting the $25 could submit a claim backed up with a receipt for $12, or another potential solution would be to have 2 separate Egg McMuffin breakfasts at 2 different events and then claim for 1 breakfast.
That would be the preference.
That would, yes, that would probably be staff's preference, just for ease, clarity, and keeping the system running smoothly.
And Madam Chair, that's exactly what I did at UBCM with my District of Clearwater claims for meals. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Blackwell. Okay, now we can move on. Ms. Ellison, thank you.
No, thank you all. It's been a slog, but we're getting there. So we have one more, I would say, small-ish discussion on another small matter, and then we'll move into the two discretionary travel and communications allowance, which might take a couple more moments. Then we'll summarize everything and hope to get you out of the door here in short order. So Marnie, if you could move us forward to Board Policy 115. This is airline tickets. So we have a separate current policy that talks about the booking of airline tickets. It does say that staff are responsible for booking flights for directors, and I think that shall remain the same. We would like to discourage directors from purchasing their own flights for reimbursement by the TNRD. It does become problematic, and it has become problematic around what is the rate that the TNRD will reimburse you when you buy your own flight. What if you use some points? What if you pay some cash? What if you buy last minute and it's expensive, or buy super early on sale? How do we reimburse that? So we'd like to move away from having directors purchase their own flights as an option. We would also like to move away from having staff booking companion flights. This again is problematic. Companion flights have been booked by staff with reimbursement, or with directors having to pay us back for those. It's just logistically challenging and time consuming for staff. It doesn't happen frequently or often, but there are handfuls of times, and it is quite disruptive. And the same language in this policy would carry forward around charges to change itineraries are the responsibility of the director. I've shortened it here for the purpose of the slide, but the language from the old policy to the new policy remains the same, as such that staff are not out there booking random flights for directors without talking to you about itineraries or plans or anything like that. So changes shouldn't be a norm that it would be required. We would be working with you on that. So if then you need to make further changes after we would work with you, any additional charges would be borne by the director. We could incorporate the same language as in previous conversations this morning, with exceptions due to death of family members, illnesses, etc. So that kind of carries forward as feedback into this discussion. So our key changes here are no more companion flights, and reducing and eliminating directors' ability to purchase their own flights and look to the TNRD for reimbursement. And we would prefer to do all the booking for you. Feedback?
Thank you. Just as when I worked for School District 74 as an office clerk, the office clerk was responsible for booking all the airline travel of not only employees of the school district, but Board of Trustee members as well. I cannot remember an instance where a Board of Trustee member booked their own flight for something. It was always booked for them. Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this explanation. I didn't know that there was an airline policy, the policy itself, until it showed up in this report. And I went back to our board policy manual, the introduction, and I can't find it still. Maybe it's in there, but I can't find it. What is in there is bylaw 2771 and the board policy 11116. So these other policies, I think I hear some desire to combine them all. I think that there's probably some efficiency there, but I do think it should make this. I've only had one flight booked. I asked the question because I didn't really feel like driving all the way down to Vancouver. I know I'm getting tired. I know that I fall asleep these days, so I really didn't want to do that drive. So I asked Chelsea, can I do that? Yeah, we can do that. Director Houghton, I told Director Houghton, I said, you know, Doug, apparently we can fly. I didn't know that. He tried to do it and it was a different circumstance for him. He can speak to that. But at the end of the day, I said, I'm going for a week. I need a ticket and I need a bag because I'm online trying to find the cheapest. And Chelsea found a cheaper one. But when I showed up, of course, I had to pay for the bag. So these little nuances, I mean, if we're trying to find the cheapest, I think we got to make sure that you're not trying to pack an overnight overhead bag for 5 or 7 days That's one thing. I think we want to get into the policy. I've not booked yet anything with a companion flight, but I don't think it's unreasonable in the private sector. If you're going for an extended stay or extended distance, it's pretty much the click of a button from one passenger to two passengers. I don't think that's a big, I don't think that's a big ask, to be blunt. I don't know how often it happens, but maybe it is. But it seems to me that if we're going to a conference, an FCM conference, I haven't done that yet, but if it's going to Halifax, my partner might want to go. There's probably programs in Halifax for partners attending conferences, so I don't think it's an unreasonable thing. So I would be opposed to the companion part. Thank you.
Director Laird, Director Middleton, and then Director Getz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. UBCM, I took my partner with me. It was indicated by staff that I had to supply a credit card to cover the expenses because Linda attended quite a few of the events at UBCM. I gave him my credit card and it was the charges for my partner were put on my own credit card. I can't see why we couldn't do the same thing with the companion flights, because usually if I fly anywhere, I'm usually taking my partner with me, and it's like we have to make sure that our companion is paid separately than going through the board. I think at one time it used to be deducted or it came off some of your expenses, but I like what the current policy is now. And I think it would be a service that I'd much appreciate. I can't see ever being able to have me and my companion travel on the same flight if it's not booked the same day. Thank you.
We have Director Middleton, Director Getz, and then Director Graham.
So Doug, bad comment. I agree with the booking of the companion flights. Is it just booking flights can become complicated, and you can book a flight and go back to that same flight half an hour later to book a second flight and it's not available. So I think if you're looking at, travelers being booked on the same flight, that it should be done at the time the original flight is booked to avoid that complication. So I agree that that the TNRD should continue to book companion flights, and like say the credit card is provided to apply those costs to or whatever. But I think booking flights is a tricky proposition, and we should make it that we don't run into those types of issues.
And CFO Fox.
Thank you, Chair, through to the board. I think some of the complications with taking the visa from somebody and using their visa is the authentication. They make it very complicated now with sending you a code, sometimes to your phone or to your email or to your spouse's phone. And I think we've just run into some of those complications. Also, obviously taking somebody's credit card information. If you've ever tried to give your credit card information over the phone to a business, they can take it. There's an expectation that information is not held, that anything cannot be written down, and it all has to be destroyed afterwards. So we're not holding anybody's personal credit card information. There's just I just wanted to let you know that there are some issues, and I think that's maybe the difference of what happened in your two situations, Director Houghton and Director Grenier.
Thank you. Director Getz.
Thank you. So when I travel with my wife through the city, I pay for everything she goes on, her trip, her partner program, everything. That doesn't get covered by the city. So I'm surprised it gets covered by the TNRD, because we don't cover that in the city. We pay for, if I take my partner, I pay for everything. So just letting you know.
Well, for clarification, I don't think the TNRD does not pay for companions. They may pay for the purchase of the ticket, which is then reimbursed to the TNRD. Yeah. And I do agree about booking companion flights at the same time because 10 minutes later, there could be no seats left on that flight. So trying to coordinate the booking of 2 seats is on the same flight between 2 different people could be tricky. I think though we could put perhaps language in there saying that if when you approach the TNRD saying, yes, I would like a flight to UBCM, you need to say at that time, and I would like one booked for a companion. If you ask for a flight to be booked for yourself and then 2 weeks later go back and say, oh, and my partner, whoever is now coming with me, then no, the TNRD cannot book that. And if you can't get flight seats on the same flight, then that's on you. I've got Director Graham and then I've got Director Grenier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question has already been answered. I'm not in favor of the staff not booking for our spouses because of the reasons that just came up. Thank you.
Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify, we didn't know as new directors, we didn't know we could fly. So we've already talked about getting it into the policy and letting us know early enough that that's the case. And for things like UBCM, where it's in Vancouver or distant areas, I think it would be useful and probably cost effective if the person that's booking the hotel room for us would at the same time ask us whether we would care to drive or fly down. Presumably that booking took place, I don't know, 2 months before I don't know how far in advance okay, well then it might make some sense approaching the next conference to ask each one of the directors if they intend to fly, especially new ones that didn't know that they could fly. And I think what happened was when I found out and I did book with Chelsea, I said to Doug, oh, Doug, why don't you fly? By the time he was able to talk to Chelsea and a weekend had rolled through and whatever else had happened, the prices had gone up. And I think that was the consternation for Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea's now looking at trying to book that. And I think, we could avoid all of that if we just jumped on it a little sooner,
Yeah,
if
and
we had known.
totally, if I may, Chair Roden, and with all due respect, I agree with 100%. I know your flight and Director Hottens was booked the week before the conference.
Yeah.
Of course, the flights are expensive. Then we could do it 2 or 3 months ago, I guess, but we didn't realize that. We assumed people were driving because the majority do drive, but we're fine with either way. Whatever's most cost effective, we're fine with. Yeah.
And just in case anyone missed that, whatever is most cost effective. Because remember, it's not just the cost of the flights, it's all the additional, because they charge you for looking at the airplane these days, I understand. And then it's the Ubers to get you from the airport to downtown Vancouver and the Ubers to get you back, etc. So just bearing that in mind, as I understand, lots of people have reasons, good reasons to want to fly rather than drive. But it's not just the cost of the flight. And of course, the sooner we can book those flights, the less expensive it's going to be, unless the travel industry has really changed. All right, anything else on airline tickets? Director Blackwell and Director Stamer.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that point. Having traveled to the same destination multiple times for UBCM, quite often it was cheaper to fly, especially considering, well, Vancouver for UBCM conference itself, my parking and my mileage was it was well in excess, even with airport parking and mileage to Kamloops Airport, of the cost of flying versus driving. The cost of driving was actually higher with the parking fees. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Stamer.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I concur with Director Blackwell. It is, if we have enough time, I know sometimes you're booking 6 or 8 months in advance for UBCM, but again, he's right. I mean, I was just down there. It's $55 a day just to park your vehicle. You add another 400 plus kilometers each way. It's actually cheaper to fly. And then you start talking about weather conditions. So I totally agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And then you add in the travel time, travel distance from distant points to Kamloops Airport, which is much further outside Kamloops than it always is in my memory. I think it's right in downtown Kamloops, and of course it isn't. And then there's the parking fees for the 5 or 6 days that you're at the the airport, leaving your car. There's possibly hotel the night before, the night after, as there was for FCM when I went a few years ago. So it can be less expensive to fly, but again, just please don't leave it till the week before UBCM to suddenly decide that you want to fly down there. Because I've booked flights in those situations and it's not fun. All right, we move on to Director Stamer. Is that still a legacy hand there? I guess so. So we move on to the next item, Ms. Ellison.
Thank you so much. Marnie, if you could move us to discretionary travel, slide 31. Our current board policy 1.116 on board expenses allows for directors to have discretionary travel. There are certain parameters in place. Currently, that's $500 per year for municipal directors and $2,000 per year for electoral area directors. Currently in our processes or procedures, we do not track these expenses separately. So having a policy that articulates a maximum is difficult because we don't know. Basically what's happened is people are submitting all of their expenses on the expense claim form, which is accurate. We could revise it with a box that checks this is discretionary travel, and then be able to track that separately as one option. What we did for the purpose of this conversation this year was go back for 2023 and look at all of our claims. We've had approximately $3,000, I think it was $3,087 paid in 2023 to date for what we can believe to be discretionary travel based on the descriptions of travel in the travel expense forms. Of that $3,000, there was about $200 that was claimed from a municipal director. So what we're seeing here in terms of a pattern or a practice is that it's largely used by electoral area directors, minimally from municipal directors. I think makes sense in terms of meeting the needs of their constituents and their larger geographical areas. And what I'm wondering or wanting to toss the idea around with the board here again is, do we want to see any revisions to this practice? The next slide, please, Marnie. Something that we see in other RDs, there's very few that do anything. But a couple are using, and I think it was Director Grenier earlier this morning that pointed it out, although a much higher amount, is allowances for areas where there just is an incurrence of extra fees or costs or the price of doing the job. The difference is that this discretionary travel change, if we went to an allowance, it would be taxable. If we stayed at discretionary travel expenses, it is not taxable. So that is correct in that consideration that Director Grenier pointed out this morning. But I do want to bring it forward for discussion. Is this something that we want to offer to the electoral area directors given a higher need to travel or not? So I'm completely open to your feedback, despite what my face may say after 3 hours of this, but we're almost getting through. So again, open the floor to your guys' feedback around what we want to do with discretionary travel or just leave her as is.
All right, I have so far Directors Morris, Onslow, and Grenier in that order. So Director Morris, and then
Thank you through Chair Roden. Very quickly, I have given quite a bit of thought to this one. And I think in our EA upcoming directors meeting, maybe we'll have this conversation. My personal view is that the ability to travel within our region, if you look at Area P as a great example of 83 or 400 people and an expansive number of community associations, my sense is the ability for, as the director, to be able to communicate frequently, to attend the number of community association meetings that happen and have that engagement is really important. So I think that travel side, outside of our travel to UBCMs and FCMs, et cetera, I think it's really critical that we're able to continue to have that constant communication with the constituents in our area. So I'm looking forward to that conversation at the next EA meeting.
Director Onslow.
Thank you very much for that. And I will echo exactly what you have said. And if anything, I would like to see that discretionary travel reimbursement value to go up, because there are so many meetings that we are not paid to attend, but that the people that we are representing would like us to be there and those organizations. Every single time I leave my town, it is a minimum of 200 kilometers. And so for me to say and look at $1,000 a year of a taxable amount of money, that is not realistic. And it will be taking out of directors' pockets to go to these meetings that we are effectively expected to be at and not paid to be at. And we do it because we want to represent the people and we want to do a good job. But to have it come directly out of our pocket, that will limit the amount that we are willing to donate our time for.
Thank you, Director Grenier.
Ditto all of that. And I also want to just add to that, that we're not getting paid for the travel and we're not getting paid for the attendance. It's just the reimbursement to get to the meeting. So that's on those comments. I've traveled and submitted to date since I got elected 1,944 kilometers. And at the $1,000 limit, I would have only been allowed 1,639 kilometers at 61 cents. So I would be in the penalty box if we drop it at 1,000. And I would ask anybody, because all my stuff is submitted, it's open to the public. Take a look at where I've traveled, take a look at who I've met with, take a look at the circumstances and tell me which one I shouldn't have gone to. That would be good. For me to travel in my area, as other electoral areas, and mine's one of the smaller electoral areas, to go to Lac Lejeune is 96 kilometers round trip. Red Lake's 176, Skeecheson 60, Dead Man Vedette's 154, Vision Quest CP Rail 120. The Rossmoor Lake wildfire with Director Houghton, we doubled up in my truck, was 143 kilometers to hear what the concerns were in Lac Lejeune area ranchers. We started off and we met with Peter Millibar and Todd Stone at the same time. So I think it was pretty good money spent. Tronquil Valley's 150 kilometers. I would be allowed under the $1,000 proposed 137 kilometers in a month. Or another way to put it is $83.33 a month to fill my Toyota Tacoma, and it costs $110 to fill my Toyota Tacoma. So the 1,000, I think is not practical. And the comment that I continually hear is we haven't seen our EA director in years. And I think it's part of this policy. So I would echo I don't know what the right number is, but 1,000 certainly is not the right number. I'm probably on my way to fulfilling the $2,000 as a reimbursement. Remember, it's paying me for the cost that I've incurred, not my time. And so I would echo what is the right amount? I don't know, but it certainly is not reducing it. The one other last thing, I know I'm going on. We have 27 directors. There are all the municipalities, and each one of those municipalities has an elected official. So between the municipalities, if I've got it right, there's 67 local elected representatives of our municipalities. They're representing roughly 120,000 people, and they cover an area of 835 square kilometers. And on an average, that's 1,295 people per elected official in the municipalities, and it's 10.6 square kilometers. If you look at the 10 electoral area directors, there's only 10 of us, not 67. There's a population of 16,942 that we 10 represent. That's an average of 1,694, about 30% more than per elected official in the municipalities. The area that we have to cover is 4,288 square kilometers. Yeah, I suppose we got an alternate, but asking the alternate to go do our mainline business, I don't think that's going to happen. That's considerably different than the 10.6. So when we're talking about a travel policy and the ability to get out and meet our constituents, I think we really have to reflect whether we're going to do the job or we're just going to say, nah, that's beyond the responsibility of the job to engage our constituents in areas where there's no cell phone, where there's limited internet access, where that ability to do the Zoom call just ain't there. If we're gonna go up to Red Lake and talk about business, we gotta be there and travel that road. And that's some facts.
Thank you, Director Laird, and then I have Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I've found over the years, as far as travel is concerned, it varies from year to year. I think the most that I've ever claimed for is about $2,200, and obviously it doesn't fit into the existing $2,000 limit right now. This year I've had very little travel. So it varies from year to year. Whatever's happening in your area, and you decide that you need to attend, I would like to have the ability to attend what's required. The $2,000 a year is, if we do it and keep our logs, it's usually enough for myself. I don't know about the rest of the directors, but I $1,000 a year in paid monthly and paying taxes on it doesn't work for me, because it's a reimbursement of our expenses. And the $2,000 a year with the logbook works fine.
Thank you, Director Thorpe.
Thank you. I would hazard a guess that I've gone over $2,000 a year. My issue is that the language on this was confusing because it talks about 2,000 being discretionary. And then there was another policy that talked about everything requiring, it sounded like the way I read it, prior approval. So I've been doing this on my own dime. I am going to go back and do a log because I wrote everything down, and $1,000 is definitely not going to cut it. As Mike said, I've been in an area where people didn't even know who the director was. They hadn't seen their director in years. And I've been out there. If people ask, I come. Am I going to tell them, nope, sorry, I can't afford to do that? That doesn't seem realistic. But I would suggest that we keep that at least $2,000 a year. If you want logs, fine, but maybe change the wording so it doesn't sound like you have to have prior approval before you go out to visit somebody who's asking you to. Those are my comments. Oh, and how far can I go back on my logs? Can I go back to the whole year? Because I'm going to do it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Director Houghton and then Director Lepso.
I suggest we put it up to 2,500.
Thank you. And I mean, this is not something to be discussed. I mean, thank you for that. Something to think about, but that's not, obviously, we're not going to be deciding that at this. I have talked to a couple of the EA directors and suggested that you guys might have an interesting next EA directors committee meeting to hash out some of these things without the municipal directors there to distract you, and figure out what your needs and desires and wants are, and then let the rest of us know. So I had Director Houghton and then Director Lepso, and then Director Gray.
Okay, so I guess I'm up. So I'm just wondering how this is budgeted for. If it's budgeted individually for each electoral area, well then, so can I ask that through the chair to the CFO? How are these budgeted? So if each electoral area has a budget, they can put whatever they want into it. They can, if they want to raise it to $2,500, they just raise what they're collecting for taxes to cover that fee, or how would they recover the amount of money if they want more money?
Thank you, Director, through to the board. So the indemnities and travel reimbursements are considered a regional cost under administration, and it's charged blanketed to all of the areas. So it's not just specific to your area. The electoral area portion of the travel, so there is a director's legislative budget, and then there is a electoral area portion that just specific electoral area charges go to. But it is both administration, regional, and it is charged out across with administration across all of the areas.
I've got Ms. Ellison, you had your hand up, and I also have CAO Hildebrand with his hand up. Ladies first.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair Roden. I just wanted to address Director Thorpe's question through the chair around how far can you go back? I mean, this has been the policy. I think you can go back where you need to go back, where you have eligible discretionary expenses. The other option, and I don't think I clarified this at the start, so I just want to be clear. We're talking about log books, but with expenses on your expense form that's submitted, you have to have the reason of your trip and whether it was discretionary or where you went and all of that detail. So when we keep it as a non-taxable expense reimbursement, you have to submit those for reimbursement on a regular basis. So the difficulty for, I do believe, all of you and staff is doing those submissions on a timely basis so that we can accurately reflect what the budget is and what the actual costs are. The switch or the potential switch to an allowance provides some ease of process because that becomes taxable, but it is also paid automatically. There is no further expense reimbursement required. So you don't have to fill out your form that says this is where I went on this day for this many kilometers. So there may be some ease in processing for both the board and staff. So I just wanted to clarify that difference. Amounts, kind of a separate conversation, but I can hear and appreciate the feedback that potentially $1,000 is not enough. I'm hearing that loud and clear. But just to keep your head attuned to that difference between an expense reimbursement and an allowance, the process is much simpler for an allowance. It does become taxable. So potentially then that dollar amount needs to be somewhat different to make up for that taxability. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Roden. Just on that vein, can you just go back a page, Marnie? I just want to make sure, just to answer Director Lepso a little bit more, so this year we would have $2,000 times 10. There'd be a $20,000 budget for mileage. We've spent $3,000. We've got 10 weeks left in the year. So there's $17,000 there. And when you go back year over year in the last while, we don't use the budget. Now we are, and I appreciate all this. We just want to make sure we got the right number. That's all. And maybe it's different by area director. I don't know. That's all we're trying to say is the run rate would suggest that we don't need 2,000, but that's not the case. And that's not what I would agree with either. We just need to figure out what the number is. That's all. We're just asking what the number is. If it's 2,500, if it's 2, that's good, but it's not being used. And it's not being used, like to Amanda's point, it's not being used monthly. We will sometimes get, in January of next year, we'll get a bill for $2,000 worth of mileage. And then we got to go back and rectify and verify and reconcile all that. So that's the only point, is we want to get the budget set properly, and then we want to make sure it's being put in as it's required.
Okay, I have Directors Graham, Laird, and Smith. We do have another discussion point after this one, just reminding people. So Director Graham.
To reduce this $2,000 to $1,000 just wouldn't cut it for the area, some of the area directors to perform their duties as elected officials. So even though I don't use it, but I'm sure that there are some that can, so the $1,000 will not work. 2 or 25 would be better.
Thank you, Director Laird.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing that would make it easier for directors would be to have a consistent logbook. So if staff produced a logbook and it was consistent and you could fill in the time, date, and where you went, and you could submit that every month. So if you had right now it's just, on an expense sheet, and it's difficult to see kilometers at such a small sheet. A logbook would really help area directors to look after their mileage a lot easier. Thank you.
Director Smith.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that $3,000 is accurate, because, and maybe I misunderstood the instructions from day one, and that's not out of the question, but I have submitted 0 because I was told right off the bat that the incidentals and the small travel areas and the little meetings here and there within 100 kilometers was just part of the job. So I have not submitted anything this year.
So again, maybe that's a subject for discussion at an EA Directors Committee meeting regarding these little things, because those 16, 20, 30 kilometer trips start to add up very, very quickly. Anything else on the discretionary travel? All right, moving right along, Ms. Ellison, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Marnie, if you can move us to slide 35. This is communications allowance. So again, we have language in our current board policy, 1.116, that says $750 a year for municipal directors, $1,500 a year for EA directors. Communications expenses, as to what we have previously or currently, refers to costs incurred to facilitate communications with your constituents. So cell phone charges, internet charges, and our current procedure, according to policy, requires monthly submission of your detailed receipts. And then our team works to provide reimbursement of those expenses. Again, here I want to insert a comment about the Canada Revenue Agency and taxation. To date, we have not been taxing reimbursement of this communication expenses, and that practice is not accurate. We need to move towards taxing communications expenses. The only way that a communications expense is not taxable is if the director can provide proof or evidence that the bills that they're submitting to us for either internet or phone or satellite or various items is 100% solely used for your work as a TNRD director. And then taxation should be based on the percentage of usage versus personal versus business. So the issue of taxation is one that has been done incorrectly in the past that we will need to fix moving forward. So I want us to keep that in mind as we talk about a potential idea to switch to an allowance, because an allowance would be taxable. And I think a significant amount of your expenses are taxable, although we are not fully doing that as of current. So that's the CRA bit. The second bit is around the average, again, what we talked about with discretionary in the sense of, do people know this is available? Because we've got a few too many policies and bylaws going on for everybody to understand everything. So do we know what's available? How much is it being budgeted for? How much is it being used? So you can see here our communication expenses per current policy. I didn't write down the total in my head, so Carla can probably math this up quicker than I. I'm going to throw a number out there. We're budgeting $27,000 for everybody to get this. That's probably not right, but you can imagine that. We've only been expending 15,000, and I did this as a rolling average over the last 6 years, primarily to electoral area directors. We've had 1 or 2 odd claims from municipal directors for communications expenses in past, but it's been primarily paid to electoral area directors. So it's another area where we are over budgeting, underspending, and hearing feedback from electoral area directors that $1,500 is not enough. So if we move to the next slide, that's where the recommendation, and this is where you give me your feedback on amounts, is that we move this to an allowance. So it's just paid. There is no submission of receipts. There's no looking for my internet bill, my satellite bill, my phone receipt. We're just paying you for the expectation that you will have to use personal stuff to successfully do your job. The ease of that comes with taxability, but let's figure out an amount that works and get people appropriately compensated for the requirement to use your own tools to do this work. Okay, open the floor for your feedback.
Director Grenier?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that. So to put some numbers to that, to maybe help guide the conversation, I live in Cherry Creek. I don't have fiber to the home. That's not an option. I could use, I guess, telephone wires, which would not keep up with technology. So my choice is Starlink internet, Elon Musk's new system, or a TELUS hub, which then is really a cell phone. It works off the cell tower, and I can do that with Bell or TELUS. It's about the same as Starlink, but the Starlink, in my case, happens to be more consistent. That's $156.80 a month after the hardware, which was $750. So it's $1,882 a year just for the internet connection. Yes, Amanda, I use it for both personal and work. So that's a consideration. Then there is the Bell mobility charge. So I am under the bring your own device, my iPhone 8 Plus, which is over 5 years apparently, and the battery is failing. So just the service, just to connect with Bell Mobility is $1,038 a year. That's $86.50 a month. And I would say that a good part of this is doing business. I get the occasional call. I get a call from my wife to pick up stuff before I come home from these meetings, but that's about it. New device, one of these, if I was to get a new device, would be according to Bell and Telus, if I was to get a 15 plus, which is the current version of this, that's a $1,315 charge for the hardware, or $38 a month over 24 months. And then you have to give it back. If I got a 14 plus, which is the old version, that's $1,181, it's $1 cheaper a month. That works out to $456 a year. So just for the internet, the cell phone, the hardware, that's $3,376 a year. And maybe we should be looking at what it is the actual cost. This happens to be my actual cost, and then what percentage of it is used personal and business. And just on the personal side, just so you know, if you go with a Starlink setup, it then says, oh, do you want to watch CNN? Well, put in your cable provider. Well, I don't have a cable provider. So if I want to watch CNN, or if I want to watch any of the programs that people in town who bundle their systems together, I can't do that. I can subscribe for individual services, pay $10, $12, whatever it is. And I'm not putting any of that in here, but the advantage of bundling, I don't get any of that. So just so you've got some context, one EA director is running at roughly $3,400 a year to have equipment before we say 60-40, 50-50, whatever the number is, personal use, business use.
Thank you. I have Director Graham and Director Hamer-Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a similar problem. My internet cost me $92.68 per month just for internet. That has nothing to do with television or whatever. And my mobility is $135 a month. That takes and puts us in an average of $200 a month, $2,400 a year, and we're getting 15. Now I think I could bring up all my records and it'll show that 90% of that has to do with TNRD. So if we're going to stop halfway through the year, cancel our subscriptions, and not get any emails from Chelsea or whoever, I mean, I get tons of them. I don't even read them all. There's so many. And when I'm out of town, I'm on the road, I use my cell phone to get my emails. So I need to have this covered, and the 15 doesn't do it. So I'm in the same problem.
Thank you. Any other, Director Hamer-Jackson, I apologize.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, all those numbers, you know, I understand all these costs and things like that, but I think what you really want to look at, because Revenue Canada doesn't really care a lot about everything that you're saying. What they do care about is, you know, for instance, what did you do before you were a director? What systems did you have? How much did that cost? And now, as a director, how much is it costing you additional? Because that's all Revenue Canada cares about, is what you're doing. It's just like having a vehicle, like, you know, you've got to have a separate vehicle to drive from here to there and that kind of thing. So I think, I'm not saying anything about that. I think I'm just saying that what did you do before you were a director, and what are you going to do after? Like, what are you going to need? Like, and if you do need all that stuff, then Revenue Canada's, you know, happy to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Director Graham.
Thank you. I appreciate that comment. I've been here over 17 years. I didn't have a cell phone at that time, and probably didn't even have the internet because I didn't know how to run a computer.
And all I'm saying is that, you know, after you're not a director, all I'm saying is that when Revenue Canada looks at it, they're gonna look at, you know, do you need to communicate with anybody after you're director? And then if you don't, well, then that's great. Then it's a complete 100% write-off.
Director Laird?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have very similar concerns. I run off a hub. I don't have any choice. It's the only way I can get connected. The hub does not even allow me to do Zoom meetings. It drops any Zoom meeting that I try and get on. So we still don't have proper communications where I live. I think we might be getting it, but at the time, you know, my expenses are very similar to the other directors for providing communications. And the other thing that's usually can be included in communications, I do some paper advertising and radio advertising, Christmas time and graduation time. That also comes out of my communications budget. I haven't been charging for those as an area director. I've been paying them out of my own pocket. So, you know, that might be another item that we need to look at, is how we communicate other than through the regional district. It's important to me that I recognize that, say Happy New Year or Merry Christmas to all the constituents. And maybe that's not what I'm allowed to do as an area director, but it's part of communications. And prior to previous CFO, he would submit the bill for any sort of radio or paper advertisings, and it would be paid, but it would come out of our communication account. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this point? Director Hamer Jackson.
And don't get me wrong, I'm all for the expenses that you need to be paid for. I just want to, you know, make sure that, you know, we're aware that all those things, there's things that we have to be doing as the job that we're doing here.
So I think what you're saying is that if you were elected last October and previous to last October, you had Starlink because you wanted it personally, and then you got elected in October and suddenly you're trying to claim that your Starlink is 100% a claimable expense, the Canada Revenue Agency is going to have a question or two for you on that point.
Yes, exactly. Any additional cost though, then definitely they're going to be fine with that.
Which it covers Director Graham, Director Laird, who have seen technology evolve during their time as elected officials and have had to add things that they would not perhaps have added previously. Director Grenier.
I'm no accountant, but, and I'll ask my accountant about that, but I don't think it's a matter of whether you started and then didn't have it and then did have it. I think it's a reasonable application of your expenses to your business concerns versus your personal concerns. And I have no difficulty finding out what that percentage is and living by that percentage. I'm just telling you that this is the check that I got to write in order to have services. And then I'm happy to have a debate among anybody about what percentage of my time on the internet is on TNRD business and what percentage of my time is on personal business. In fact, I think they're even writing programs these days that tell you what that is. So.
Thank you, Director Rain.
Yeah, I don't think we have to talk about the CRA too much because the proposal is an allowance. The question is how much. And that's going to be a taxable allowance. CRA is not going to talk to you about that as long as you pay your taxes. So the question is how much?
Okay. All right. Any further discussion on this before we move into the where do we go from here conversation? No? All right. Ms. Ellison, where do we go from here?
Okay, thank you. Just trying to refresh myself a little bit. I think where we go from here, I mean, we've talked about having a discussion at EA directors meeting, so I've got some notes to bring forward to that meeting. From there, I have some work to bring forward to the board, but I think I'm feeling decent with feedback in terms of, I don't think that, I'm trying to read the mood through the TV. I don't think it shifted. Let's keep a remuneration and expenses separate. There is some appetite to try and minimize or consolidate the expense policies. And I will go through quickly some of the feedback here because I think it is important for me to know if I look at the expense policies, we will not, we'll revisit the changes to that kilometer chart to a per hour and leave it as is. We'll leave some flexibility in there in terms of the tribunal, looking at the TNRD to cover costs of missed meeting for such reasons as, and we can't define them all, but we'll do our best to give a better summary. Same with the earliness or lateness, to build in more flexibility, focus on safety for our board members. Per kilometer rates will go to BC. Meal per diems will leave as is. Commence taxing as appropriate. Airline tickets, lots of appetite to keep the companion flights there. Potentially some more look at process on how that would work well for us. And then discretionary travel, communication travel, I think those are going to be largely ones we have to bring forward to EDA directors for more closer look at amounts. And how does that work for that group? The other side is remuneration. And that's, slightly more straightforward and not all at the same time. But I think what I've heard from the board is a general appetite to move forward for 2023, increase to remuneration at the BCCPI for last year, which will come back to you at a board meeting for formal approval. And then we will look at revising the bylaw on remuneration to reflect some updated language that we've talked about in terms of reviewing the bylaw every 2 years and allowing the board to make decisions to impose reductions in remuneration in alignment with the code of conduct policy.
Oops, could you just repeat that, Ms. Ellison? We was a little bit garbled.
Oh, I'm so sorry. The remuneration policy will bring back 2 pieces. One will be for the board's increase for 2023 to reflect the BCCPI for 2022. That will come back to the board. The second piece for remuneration that will come back to the board is the revision to the bylaw, which will include some new language to require review every 2 years, which will add language around the imposition of reduction in remuneration by decision of the board in alignment with the code of conduct policy. And as well add some more language around how we do increases to our remuneration. So there was some good ideas around doing a rolling average of CPI, implementing a conversation over a maximum or minimum. So I'll do some more work on that piece and bring the new proposed bylaw to the board for further discussion on remuneration. I think that, is a large summary, covers off. There may be other bits that Marnie and I and the team gather as we review the notes, but we'll endeavor to bring everything back to the board for formal discussion and approval in different ways, either to the remuneration bylaw through to the board, and then through some discretionary allowance discussions with the EA directors, and then back up through the board as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ellison, for the story so far. Does anyone have any questions, anything not addressed, or did they hear something differently than they anticipated? Director Laird?
Yeah, I was wondering if the policy goes to the policy committee prior to coming back to the board.
Thank you. Who can answer a process question? CEO Hildebrand?
Thank you, Chair Roden. Since it's gone to committee of the whole, I'm not sure it needs to go back to policy. I mean, the whole board is here now, so taking it back to the board for decision, I think, is the most efficient way, if that's makes sense. Unless Chair Bass from the policy committee feels differently.
Sit through this again, really?
There's your
I'm hearing little appetite to sit through this again. CFO Fox.
Thank you. I wanted to just go after any of the directors had any further questions to bring up. Number one, as being part of a finance policy, the team that's worked on this and brought this forward, it is extremely difficult for staff to bring a policy or policies like this forward. And put numbers in front of you and not make it look like a recommendation. So I really appreciate the feedback with, you know, this might not be what we want, but we would like to see this, and just give us some solutions on ways forward. One of the things I'm always reminded of in the role that I play with so many staff that do this, I often am not the one trying to interpret the policy, it's staff, and I have to listen to their concerns. One of these things is a bit of a double-edged sword, because as our previous CFO had been making some decisions and helping the board, some of the things that have come out of the forensic audit is the board has requested a compliance audit. Staff are very aware that you are asking for a compliance audit, and what that means is a report's going to come back to you saying whether they're following your policies. So you're asking them to be graded and to report back to you guys and in the public, and they want to do the right thing ethically and make sure that they are meeting the standards that you're setting. So I just want to bring that back, not to put a negative connotation, but I can sense frustration with the board on a daily basis, talking to staff about expense reimbursements and seemingly staff making it more difficult. That's not what we're trying to do, but you're putting a grading card out there and then asking us sometimes to go against maybe what we're interpreting. So we appreciate how much time this takes and the difficult conversation. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Ms. Fox, to you and your staff for bringing this forward. I know I appreciate how difficult it must be for you to bring this to us for our consideration, and thank you for putting yourselves in the crosshairs and starting a conversation. CEO Hildebrand.
I just wanted to apologize for this painful meeting. I know it's hard, but ultimately we need to get your feedback before we can make any change. That's just how it works. So I apologize for that. Just you got the weekend ahead of you now, at least. So thank you for that. We'll bring back a kind of a fulsome report that covers all your feedback.
All right. And so does anyone else have anything? Director Hamer Jackson.
I'd just like to thank everybody, the committees and everybody in the staff. I think it's great. And I think that this discussion, even though it takes a few hours, I think it's really good because we're all here. And at the end of the day, you know, we've all got to be accountable. So I think it's, you know, I think it's great that what we've just done.
Thank you very much. And on that positive note, ladies and gentlemen, we sit adjourned. Have a lovely long weekend. Safe travels. We've had so many long weekends lately that I just expect that this is another long weekend as well. Have a lovely fall weekend.